Chair Redmond,
Present.
Councillor Liggett,
Present.
Councillor McCabe,
Present.
Councillor Deutschman, Councillor Shantz,
Present.
Councillor Harris,
Present.
Councillor Craig, Councillor Foxton,
Present.
Councillor Erb, Councillor James,
Present.
Councillor Solonen,
Present.
Councillor Wolf, Councillor Nowak, Councillor Hewink,
Present.
and Councillor Williams.
Present.
Great. I would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gathered today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. We acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today, their achievements and their contributions to our community. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? We will now proceed with the delegations as listed on the agenda. Delegations will be heard today, but no decisions will be made. I would like to remind all delegations of some guidelines for participation. For those that are participating virtually today, please leave your video camera turned off and your microphone audio muted until you are called upon to speak. For those that are participating here in person, please wait in the gallery until you are called to the podium to speak. Today's delegations will be allotted 5 minutes to speak. Groups of 2 or more will be allotted 10 minutes. Any delegations who registered after the deadline will be allotted 3 minutes to speak. Because of the number of delegations tonight, I will give you a warning, a 1 minute warning at 4 minutes, and you will be asked to conclude at the 5 minutes to be respectful of everyone on the docket tonight. Remember, if you are watching the webcast of this meeting and would like to address the committee at the end of the registered delegations, you can contact regional clerk at regionofwaterloo.ca during the meeting to obtain the link. We also ask that you leave the meeting once your issue has been addressed. You are then welcome to watch the remainder of the meeting being webcast live via YouTube. I would imagine that's for folks attending online. We also ask that you leave, I would also like to remind all delegations of some of the guidelines for participation. If you conduct yourself in any of the following manners, it will result in the immediate removal from the meeting. Interrupting councillors, staff, or other delegations, derogatory statements about councillors, staff, or others, turning your camera on at appropriate times, and hate speech or defamatory comments. One last reminder for delegations. Please do not take offense if following your presentation there are no questions from council. This is council's time to really listen and reflect upon the opinions and ideas shared with us from our community members. Councillors should limit their questions to point of clarification. With that, I will call on Jody Koberniski to be our first presenter tonight. They are appearing virtually. Jody, you have 5 minutes. Good evening. I don't see Jody in the virtual room, so we'll now call on Craig Sloss. I believe Craig is appearing in person. You have 5 minutes.
On the budget increase for the Waterloo Regional Police Services, sharing my expertise in data science to provide a perspective on the reliability of the statistics that have been cited as justification for the budget increase. Much of the motivation for increasing the police budget is fear over an increase in violent crime. First, I looked into whether past increases in the police budget have had an impact on the rate of reported incidents in our region, using data from StatsCan's Uniform Crime Reporting Survey. Between 2017 and 2021, the police budget increased consistently year over year. And in all 5 years, we saw that budgetary increases failed to prevent the increase in the reported violent crime rate. Now, there are 2 problems with my initial analysis. First, it doesn't account for the impact of inflation on the budget, and it doesn't account for the impact of population growth. In this graph, I adjusted the budget to $2022 and expressed the budget on a per population basis. I then compared the police budget to some other major line items in the regional budget. Over this time period, the police budget grew at a rate faster than inflation and population combined. Housing services and public health programs just barely kept pace, and we saw a significant defunding of agencies such as the Waterloo Region Crime Prevention Council and Children's Services. While funding for the Waterloo Region Crime Prevention Council has recently been eliminated, the historical connection between its deteriorating funding and the rise in reported violent crime rates provides an important lesson to learn about future funding for agencies that are engaged in crime prevention. Now, understanding trends is an important part of budgeting because budgets are about planning for the future and all data is about the past. A trend is a pattern of change in a statistic over time, either upward or downward, that we expect to continue into the future. A memo presented to the Police Services Board on January 18th cited several year-over-year increases in specific types of crimes as part of the justification for its budget proposal. For example, the memo highlights a 56% increase in shootings between 2021 and 2022. But what we really need to understand in order to plan for 2023 is whether this is likely to continue for another year. I want to emphasize that under no circumstances is it appropriate to conclude that a statistic is trending based on only 2 years of data. I will illustrate why this is misleading using data from the Uniform Crime Reporting Survey. Now, this data doesn't include shootings as a category of criminal violation, so I looked at a broader category, the total number of reports of firearm use. Now, between 2009 and 2022, there were 6 times that we saw a year-over-year increase in the number of incidents. 4 of these times, the number of incidents decreased in the following year. And in only 2 of those instances did it continue to increase. A single year-over-year increase is not a reliable indicator of what will happen in the future. We have not seen a consistent increasing trend over this time period, and a more plausible explanation is that the number of incidents tends to fluctuate around an average value of 33. To add to the unreliability of the year-over-year statistics, I am also concerned that Council is not being presented with the full picture of what happened between 2021 and 2022. Appendix C in the memo mentions types of crimes where the number of reports increased year over year, but makes no mention of types of crimes where reports decreased. While the data for 2022 have not been made publicly available, there are numerous reports of crimes where the number of reported incidents between 2020 and 2021 decreased. I identified 5 examples in the table that you're seeing here.
1 minute. All
right, as I mentioned previously, we need more years of data to really conclude whether or not this is a trend, but what I mean to point out is that there does seem to be a bias in the information that you're being presented with, where you're being only shown things that are increasing and not things that are decreasing. A natural question to ask is why we need to maintain the same level of resource for types of crimes where the budget reports where the number of reports has decreased, rather than reallocating these resources to emerging priorities. Unfortunately, the publicly available police budget does not have the level of transparency that would allow us to assess whether the resources allocated match the workload associated with each type of crime. The budget is summarized into high-level totals for items such as salaries and benefits, but there's no breakdown in the budget of the kinds of activities that the officers are assigned to. In summary, my analysis of the statistics provided to justify the proposed police budget has identified situations where the information is misleading and incomplete. I would strongly urge the council to insist that an independent control be put in place to ensure that the statistical information you're presented with is relevant, complete, and interpreted correctly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Craig, for your time. I'll now call on Jessica Hutchison, who is appearing virtually. Jessica, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Point of clarification, question?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Chair. Mr. Slosh, just thanks for your presentation and for coming in tonight. Wondered, with the statistics you're showing us, if you identified any longer-term trends as well in the data.
Yeah, so because I made that point that that you should never really conclude things about a single year-over-year statistic.
Right,
I looked at those 5 year-over-year statistics where I saw a decrease, and one of them, I believe it was a probation violation. I did notice that it did correspond to a fairly consistent trend. What it seemed to do is peak around 2017, and it was a very consistent decrease year over year from then until the present. So. Yeah, I can maybe follow up with some more specific numbers because I don't have them off the top of my head, but I'm just sort of recounting the visual that I remember seeing and cut from the presentation for time, so.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd like to call on Jessica Hutchison, who is appearing virtually. Jessica, you have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Chair Redmond and regional councillors. Thank you for hosting this public input session. My name is Jessica Hutchison, and I'm a tenure-track professor of social work at Laurier, specializing in state violence enacted through prisons and policing. I've also been designated as an expert witness in strip searching by the Ontario Superior Court and testified in a Charter of Rights and Freedoms case in 2021. I'm also a member of Reallocate Waterloo Region. Today, I'm not going to be presenting other people's research showing the harms of policing, such as how the WRPS disproportionately record Black people, or that police shootings have increased by 25% across Canada. Tonight, I'm going to be presenting my own research. For my PhD dissertation, I conducted research into women's experiences of being strip searched. To provide context, police in Ontario conducted over 22,000 strip searches per year in 2014, 15, and 16, of which 20 to 25% were women. We don't have any local data on strip searching, but in Toronto, 1/3 of people strip searched are Black, and nearly 1/3 of Indigenous people arrested are strip searched. And 50% of women in federal prison are Indigenous, which means they are disproportionately strip searched. People believe strip searching results in the discovery of items, but data show this is not the case. In Toronto, only 2% of police strip searches results in items being found, and in women's federal prisons, only 1.6 items per prison per year are found. For my research, I conducted in-depth interviews with 23 previously imprisoned women, 11 identified as Indigenous, 6 as Black, 5 as white, and 1 as racialized. And all had contact with police because police are the gateway to imprisonment. I'm going to be sharing with you how women described strip searching, and I'd like to provide a content warning because there are graphic descriptions of sexual violence. Chantel is a Métis woman who said, "The very first time I was strip searched was in the police cells, and I had no idea what was going on. They had 4 female police officers come in and strip me fully, and it was crazy. I'm a rape survivor as well, and a child abuse and sexual abuse survivor. So at that time, it was fully stripped. Lift your hair, move your ears, lift your tongue, lift your arms, lift your breasts, spread your legs." Sorry it gets descriptive, because if you haven't been there, people don't know what you're talking about when you say you're strip searched, right? You spread your legs to shoulder width, you bend over, touch your toes, cough, squat, spread your cheeks, cough again. And then your clothes are in a pile there. And then they tell you to get dressed, and they walk away, and it's dirty. Darcy, a Black woman, said, "What they did to me I've always thought was a form of sexual abuse. It can only be sexual abuse. It's your most intimate of parts being violated. It's a form of sexual abuse." Gina, a racialized woman, said, "It's sexual abuse and it's mentally draining. It is definitely a form of abuse because you're not giving consent. You're being forced. Anybody on the street, if your partner or something is telling you to spread your legs and everything you don't want to, and they're forcing that, that would be abuse, and that would be something you can charge them with." And Elaine, a Saulteaux woman, said, "It felt like abuse. It felt like a sense of rape, you know, and no matter how respectful a person tries to be, or how good of a person they are to you, but they still ask you to take your clothes off and bend over, it's just not right." And Kate, a white woman, said, "It's state-sanctioned sexual assault, and they get away with it. There is no reason for strip searches." The main finding of my research is that strip searching is sexual violence. As Gina stated, in any other context, forcing people to remove their clothes and perform actions with intimate body parts would be considered sexual violence. And as Kate pointed out, sexual violence is embedded within the structures of policing via legislation, policies, and practices. So this is not about a few bad apples. As the brilliant Tennille Warren has said, it is about the rotten soil the trees are planted in. In conclusion, policing is not compatible with decolonization or truth and reconciliation, with anti-racism or sexual and gendered violence prevention. Policing, criminalization, incarceration, and punishment do not bring us any closer to genuine safety because they neither prevent nor interrupt violence. They are forms of violence. A vote to increase the police budget is a vote to increase sexual violence. So I'm calling on you to vote for real safety. I'm calling on you, ACB Network's calls to action, to send the police budget back to the PSB for a 0% increase and to reallocate the proposed increase to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now call on Anne Marie Beals, who is appearing in person. Good evening, Anne Marie. If you want to make your way to the podium, you've got 5 minutes.
Can you hear me? Yep, okay. I'm ready. So hello, my name is Anne Marie and I am a community member in Waterloo Region. I come before you this evening, councillors, to request that you do not accept the increase in the police budget for 2023. An increase in the police budget means a decrease in cultural life, arts, recreation, and the things that make and strengthen this community and our dreams for the future. As well, an increase in the police budget means an increase in our property taxes, of which some may not be able to afford. So instead of investing in increased surveillance, such as body cams, because the research shows they do not work in preventing crime, invest in community-based responses to harm, need, and conflict that are better suited if we consider that the people of the region have the right to a good quality of life. And we do. As examples, police do not need to respond to mental health crises, healthcare situations, or people in crises. These matters can be taken care of by providers in our community with the funding that is being asked for this evening. A police approach does not protect those in crises. More money for police does not prevent crime. More police officers does not equate to less crime. You want less crime in the region? Then instead of increasing an already bloated police budget, invest the money in housing, healthcare, education, and land back, in providing opportunities for the rights of all community members. The Waterloo Regional Police stated that 84% of the homicides in this region committed in 2022 were domestic violence cases, yet the police did not avert these tragic yet preventable deaths. Research shows that domestic violence disproportionately affects Black and Indigenous women, Two-Spirit, and transgender people. Another example of how police do not prevent crime, but may actually increase crime, is evidenced in November 2021, where Waterloo Regional Police removed a 4-year-old Black child from a school. For our children to have such violent interactions with police can exacerbate the school-to-prison pipeline, where our children are increasingly forced to interact more and more with police. Yet we know unequivocally, as shown by Waterloo Regional Police data and data from regions across Ontario, that Black, Indigenous, and racialized people are disproportionately racially profiled by police. That manifests as increased levels of police surveillance, harassment, and violence, and hinders Indigenous, Black, racial, gender, economic, and disability justice that affects all peoples in this region. And before you say to yourself, like Jessica said, well, maybe it's just a few bad apples. Like the police officers who violently arrested Abdisalam Omer on July 5th, 2020, who did not commit a crime, even as it was necessary for Mr. Omer to go to the hospital to recover from the police psychological and physical violence. Because Abdisalam Omer was racially profiled by police prior to the violence perpetuated on him as they forced him into a socially precarious position. Or the police shooting of Noah, a 19-year-old youth shot 9 times, ending up in the hospital in critical condition, even as the police charged him with the crime under this very questionable approach to public safety. What Noah required was community healthcare support. What Abdisalam Omer needed was not to be a Black man. These are just some of the examples of a systemic problem in policing, where the tools and authority in a given context leads police to deploy their power unjustly against Black, Indigenous, and racialized people.
1 minute.
Police do not prevent crime, yet the police system continues to increase in funding year over year. If we continue to doing the same things over and over again and expect different results, then is this not the definition of absurdity? The only logical conclusion is that police do not prevent crime. Equitable access to healthcare, housing, education, libraries, social services, and community-based programs prevent crime. Your hands are not tied, councillors. You have the power to say no to the requested police budget increase, while you also have the power to increase funding to community care that decreases crime. Use your power in a good way for an equitable and just society, working towards futures that provide meaningful investments in community supports. We can imagine as a region, as a place that is safe and equitable for all people, given the graciousness of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples in existing on these lands.
Thank you, Anne Marie.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to now call upon Tennille Warren, who is appearing virtually. Tennille, good evening, and you've got 5 minutes.
Good evening. The Waterloo Region Police Service budget includes a request for a surplus of $1.055 million. That surplus includes a hiring of police based on algorithmic or predictive policing. In simple terms, it is based on fiction. The kind of fiction that keeps the carceral infrastructure funded. I watched the chief's presentation of opaque numbers, mathematical models, and stories of paranoia told in a language of risk. Every year, the police use fear to justify the request of overinflated investment in the failed model of public safety. Alternatively, community members, organizations, charities, and nonprofits who are not offered an entire council meeting to present a case for access to public funding present an argument of community care and hope. For the 2022 police budget, the Police Services Board approved a phasing in of 35 officers, which created a savings of $1.05 million. These savings have been eaten up for the 2023 police budget, as the Police Services Board voted to annualize the 19 officers proposed in this budget, starting on January 1st. What is most egregious for me is the justification for this. In stating so, I do not remember, one Police Services Board member said, I do not remember we recommended phasing in 2022. It screws the budget up for the following year, which we're finding out now. I think the one advantage is, if you add it in and annualize it from the start of the year, that you end up having is a surplus. Just to be clear, whatever we add, I think it should be annualized from January 1st. It should not be phased in. Regardless of whether it's a stretch to whether we think we're going to get them all hired at a certain point in the year. This fictional funding request was unanimously approved by the PSB. This is a budget the regional is now considering. Non-profit, charitable, and community organizations cannot budget for a surplus. Furthermore, the audit process and charitable oversight put small, underfunded organizations under a surveillance as they lead the work of caring for our community. Food, housing, mental health, healthcare, harm reduction, settlement, and more. They are forced to depend on the benevolence of the community to make up the budgetary shortfall. The act of governing nonprofits and charities hold them to a higher standard of financial accountability than the police. Additionally, the PSB proposing a surplus which speaks to an absence of budgetary oversight, not only by the Police Services Board, but also by the Regional Council. In viewing Chief Cromwell's budget presentation, one regional councillor suggests that the police be handled gently, a kindness that they do not offer to public funding. They have sought to budget ahead in a financially unpredictable time in our history. As we face a food crisis and a housing crisis, the Waterloo Region Police Service says fund surveillance and control over shelter and safety. The Regional Council's hands are not tied. This is evident in the lack of robust questioning that was put forward to this budget when it was presented to you earlier this week. This request from the WRPS is rooted in fictional predictive policing that has not been effectively questioned or challenged by this council. It dismisses hope. It dismisses the idea that the community will ever truly be safe. It is the creating of a paranoid society to fund carceral capitalism. The police do not prevent the root causes of crime. They do not prevent the root causes of harm and conflict. They do not offer healing or support. Instead, they are given more time than any other organization to present their case to a group of people who are here to represent all of our citizens. So one of the questions I ask is, in and of itself, the police budget presentation is a privilege that only the police are afforded. Moreover, I would ask us to consider how much does it cost the regional council as you fund the police budget for them to have the resources and capacity to even make such a presentation.
1 minute.
I urge you to consider the calls to action from the ACB network of Waterloo region to send back the police budget and to challenge the police and to stand with the community who are willing to say no on this request. Thank you.
Thank you, Tennille. I will now call on Melissa Bowman, who I believe is appearing here in person. Melissa, good evening. You have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Council. I echo many of the comments made by the previous delegations. I have 3 main areas in the budget that I'd like to address: transit, policing, and housing. First, on transit, I'm happy to see that there's an overall increase in service hours for 2023. I'm hopeful that will result in less cancellations and trips on any given day. As someone who relies on transit, I know how having your regular transit route canceled, often at the very last minute, results in a stressful commute. And while I very much appreciate the GRT service alerts, it's not uncommon for them to be released many minutes after a bus is supposed to have arrived at its stop. I hope to see continued improvements and timeliness on such alerts, or better yet, fewer cancellations overall. I was disappointed to hear that a suggested increase in transit fares may result in a loss of ridership of approximately 100,000. I hope Council sees that as a real risk that we need to avoid. Our community has invested well in transit and had been reaping the rewards of that prior to the pandemic. And it looks like we are reaching those pre-pandemic numbers again. To implement a fare increase that may lose ridership is not the direction that we need to go, especially in a climate emergency. I understand a couple of ideas are being considered for transit, including the possibility of free transit for children and seniors. While I welcome free transit for children, making it much more affordable for families to travel using transit, I'm not convinced that investing in free transit days for seniors is the best approach, especially since, as staff noted recently, seniors as a whole are less likely to meet the low-income threshold. I'd rather see the Affordable Transit Pass program expanded, which will allow individuals and families of all ages to access affordable transit as needed. I also wonder if there might be other ways to promote transit, like a free transit day or free family transit passes at community events, or extending the transfer time. I'm also not convinced that fare enforcement officers are a good investment. I'd like to better understand the costs and supposed benefits to the program before continuing to invest in it. Might we be better off with some sort of support team without the power to issue fines, but with the ability to offer support, knowledge, and assistance to those using transit? Moving on to policing. The WRPS are seeking an increase of $18 million in the police operating budget and a capital budget of $20 million in 2023. Just 10 years ago, the police budget was $135 million. If the request of $214 million is granted, the police operating budget will have increased by almost $80 million, a nearly 60% increase in just a decade. I'm also concerned about the approach taken in the police budget presentation that encouraged fear of our community, even though our region is incredibly safe. A police board member opened up the presentation by saying, growing up in the 70s in Waterloo region feels very different than now, yet a comparison of the Canadian crime rate in the 70s to more recently shows an overall decrease in crime. However, several councillors commented about how their eyes had been opened to the increase in crime locally because of that presentation. During that same presentation, we heard how Waterloo region is growing, resulting in a lower officer per capita rate. And while that's true, I'd ask why we assume that those earlier officer per capita rates are our future goal. If the WRPS is serious about shifting from reactive to proactive approaches, perhaps we should aim for that officer per capita rate to continually decline as we shift our funding to more preventative approaches. Instead, the WRPS just added 35 new officers last year. They want an additional 19 this year and 36 more over the next 2 years after that. That will mean we will have hired 90 officers in 4 years. How does that move us towards proactive and preventative supports? As mentioned by other delegates, the annualized salaries seem to support a surplus, which is problematic. Now, in the police budget presentation, we heard it is our citizens that are asking for our help. We require additional support to provide the level of service that is being demanded of us. If that's true, we should inform residents of alternatives while also investing deeply in those alternatives. Which brings me to housing. Housing has been a bit of a roller coaster ride lately. I've been heartened to see more investment in a variety of housing supports, including a willingness to create an outdoor shelter. However, it was frustrating to see the region take encampment residents to court during that same time. We need the upper levels of governments to take a larger role in funding this work. And perhaps there's a role for council to lead more of that advocacy. There are many of us willing to do this work, but having more guidance from you in how best to do that would be beneficial. Staff recently suggested that if council wanted to ease some of the capital pressures on this budget, then the goal of 2,500 new affordable homes in 5 years could be stretched to over 7 years. I really urge council to stick to that original commitment of 5 years, and there's a lot more to say, but not enough time to say it, so I will end there. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. I would like to call upon Diana Wiles, CEO of Leadership Waterloo Region, who's appearing in person. Diane, welcome, and you have 5 minutes.
It's great, wonderful. Thank you for having me here this evening, Chair Redmond and our councilors. My name is Diane Wiles, and I am the CEO of Leadership Waterloo Region, and I'm a graduate from the core program class of 2002. I'm joined here this evening by some members of Leadership Waterloo Region's Board of Directors, which are a group of dedicated community members who know that one person can make a difference. I'm here today to ask for sustainable funding. One thing is certain, our community, like many others, will always have to deal with serious issues. With serious issues comes a need for complex solutions. 22 years ago, 4 local leaders joined together with 6 organizations to build a framework for Leadership Waterloo Region. The landscape of Waterloo Region was different in the early 2000s. Seemed like we had a better economy, fewer people, less of an aging population, appropriately resourced healthcare, and overall better trust in our systems. No one thought that within our lifetime, mental illness, addiction, abuse, firearms, human trafficking, homeless encampments, racism, isolation, and the discovery of Indigenous children's graves would be headlines in our daily papers. The challenges facing us today and in the future are real issues being dealt with by real people. Our quality of life is dependent on the quality of our leaders. We need leaders that can design and implement the complex solutions we so desperately require to help solve some of the challenges we face. Volunteer Canada and Imagine Canada are sharing some stark statistics. The number of volunteers has decreased since the pandemic. In fact, some organizations have reported that now they have 50% fewer volunteers. Stats Canada tells us that 65% of charities and nonprofits report difficulty recruiting new volunteers, and this is resulting in program closures. Fewer volunteers mean that staff are having to fill in these gaps. Burnout is a real thing, and people are often leaving the industry. We need more trained leaders. We need to build capacity. As I stand here tonight asking for funding, what I'm really asking for is an investment in the future of our community, because that is what Leadership Waterloo Region does. We build leaders who take on these big issues, who have those tough conversations, who are bridge builders, collaborators, who are diverse of thought and experienced, who are equipped with the skills and tools they need to make big change happen where it's most needed. There are people like Cameron Dearlove and Jessica Hutchison, both from the class of 2014. Asma Walsh, who's sitting behind me, class of 2021. Some of you sitting around this horseshoe. We have Mayor Verbanovic, class of 2001. We have Councillor James, who's class of 2017. Councillor Harris, 2005. Mayor McCabe, 2003. Other graduates you may know are Brian Larkin, class of 2004, John Goodman, class of 2015, Sarah Castleman, class of 2012, Fazia Mazar, class of 2005, and Fazia Beg, class of 2016.
1 minute.
We have an additional 500-plus names, but I just don't have the time to go through those today. But it's really clear to us that leadership is a major part of this upstream solution our community needs. Since the beginning of COVID, the focus on financial support and opportunities have shifted away from capacity building initiatives. We too are connecting and engaging with leaders from diverse and underserved communities. We're building relationships, making connections, and helping build the capacity needed to make greater impact. What we bring with new leaders is also a resource of over a network of 500 people that will help new leaders find their space in our community. We're asking for $100,000 to help build sustainability so we can concentrate on the new issues and also what's coming down the pipe.
Thank you, Diane.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. I'd like to now call on TK Pritchard, Executive Director of the Shore Center. TK will be here in person. Good evening, and you've got 5 minutes.
Oh, this isn't working. Oh yeah, there you go. No, if anyone was going to break the tech, it was me. Tonight I'm here to ask you one question. Does Waterloo Region want to be a community that values gender equity, bodily autonomy, and inclusive healthcare? For over 50 years, Shore Center has been advancing and protecting gender equity and reproductive rights through access, education, and advocacy. We provide free counseling, medical care, education, perinatal mental health support, and much more. The work we do is often unseen, complex, and within systems which are actively working against women, trans, and non-binary people. Shore Center serves community members like Amy, who's experiencing an unplanned pregnancy and needs safety planning after telling her boyfriend who threatens her with violence. And Rona, a refugee visiting a doctor for her first pap test in Canada without an interpreter to tell her what the doctor is doing to her body. And Blair, an expecting parent who experiences transphobia at their prenatal visits and as a result struggles alone without the support that they need for themselves and their new baby. And finally, Sam, a 10-year-old who's received no sexual health education and experiences fear, distress, and confusion when she gets her first period. At Shore Center, we work to ensure that all those needing support never walk alone. Shore has been grateful for the ongoing support of the region since 1976. However, the demand for our services and the complexities of client needs have exponentially grown over the years, while our funding has remained the same. Shore has not received an increase in our funding since 2005, over 17 years ago, despite significant changes to our services and community needs. Since 2005, our client numbers have more than quadrupled, with additional increases expected this year. We opened a medical clinic to address little to no access to timely and inclusive reproductive health care in our community. We have tripled our counseling and education staff to meet local demand. We have added new programs to better serve the community, including a newcomer health program, programs for people with disabilities, racialized youth, queer youth, and more, as well as extensive perinatal mental health support services. We have taken on many leadership roles in the community to support well-being related to perinatal mental health, gender-based violence prevention, 2S LGBTQ+ inclusion, and much more. We have done much of this work with time-limited grants, which do not allow us to sustainably build the services needed within this community. We are working hard to meet the demand and ensure Waterloo Region is a community that has accessible and cutting-edge access to the resources we provide, and we need the region's help to continue to do so. Today, we are asking you for increased financial support of at least $50,000 per year in addition to our current funding, in order to meet the demand for counseling and education and to sustain our services. As our community grows, so does the need for care, support, education, and resources. Our region has a choice to make. Are we going to be a place that provides wraparound care, values the needs of women, trans, and non-binary people, and ensures that our community can thrive? Here at Shore, we are ready and able to be part of that future. We have the expertise, experience, and passion. We just need your help to make sure our doors are open to all those who need us. Thank you.
Thank you, TK. Councillor James.
Yes, through you, Chair Harris. Thank you, TK, for your presentation. Just have a question.
course.
You've asked for 50,000. Can you say what you've currently been getting from the region?
So we've received just over $50,000 a year currently.
Okay, and then just to follow up, what other type of funding are you doing? Or how else do you get your funds?
So the vast majority of our funding is from time-limited community grants, so from funders like the Lyle S. Hallman Foundation, donors, fundraising campaigns. We're fortunate to receive one of the region's upstream funds to support some of our newcomer-specific programming. But a lot of my job and a lot of my time is spent applying for grants and trying to sustain the organization in those kind of time-limited spaces.
Thank you, that's it, thank you.
Councillor Foxton.
Thank you. Councillor James asked the same questions I was going to ask. But well done. To go from 3,500 to 15,000, well done. You must be very proud.
Thank you.
What a great advantage for us to have you in our community.
Thank you. I have a really wonderful team working hard.
Thank you, TK.
Thanks.
I would now call on Asma. Just was added, Councillor Wolf.
Through you, Mr. Chair. And back to you.
I will stop running away now, I'm sorry.
Okay. Again, thank you for your presentation and for the work Shore does. How many locations do you have?
Great question, thank you. We provide our services out of our downtown Kitchener site, as well as in Guelph, which is a separate funding stream. And then we also have a site in Linwood in partnership with the Woolwich Community Health Center. That's just our physical site. We do offer services across the region and in all areas.
So do you have any in Cambridge?
We have had a site in Cambridge until very recently. We're currently in transition to a new site, which will ideally allow us to provide the medical services that we provide in town. We were only able to previously provide outreach. So a small gap right now in a physical site in Cambridge, but it is in the plans in this coming year.
Thank you.
Councillor Huanick.
Through you, Chair Harris. Hi, TK. Where did the $50,000 increase come from? I mean, do you have costing as to what that $50,000 will accomplish?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So we would be using the funds specifically in our sexual health education program, as well as the free counseling that we provide. And that counseling does cover everything from perinatal mental health support one-on-one, which in this region, we have a significant lack of access to free perinatal mental health resources. So that would be an accessible resource for folks. So it would be split again between our counseling specifically and our sexual health education.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, TK. I would like to call on Asma, the CEO and founder of the Canadian Arab Women's Association. Asma, you've got 5 minutes. I believe you're here. So good evening. Welcome.
Thank you so much. This is the first time for me here, so hopefully it will be really great. Thank you so much for having me today, and I am really today very proud of having many people from the Arab community, volunteer participants, and some of our staff here. As Chair said, my name is Asma Al-Wahsha, and I am the founder and the executive director of Canadian Arab Women Association. I found CAWA in 2016 to support, connect, and empower Arab women in Waterloo region and Guelph. CAWA is committed to culturally sensitive, barrier-free, and accessible programs. Most of our programs are facilitated in Arabic based on the needs of our participants and the intention to combat an overall lack of available Arabic language programming for women in our communities. I immigrated to Canada in 2012 from Jordan. As a new immigrant, I started to read the news and comment sections and listen to what people said around police. What struck me immediately was that the general opinion seems to be that police were overpaid and that police services were wasting resources. I kept listening, following this discourse, without really having any opinion on it. But that changed forever when we worked with Waterloo Regional Police Service in 2018 and forward on a 10-week program to educate Arab women and men on topics such as gangs, human trafficking, domestic violence, cybercrimes, sexual harassment, hate crimes, and many other related policing issues. For most of the program participants, this was the first time they received information on these topics. And one of Kawa's volunteers, who have lived there forever in Canada, shared that through this program, she had learned so many new things that she was unaware of policing before. Her appreciation of the police was taken to a new level. This program was the first of its kind in our community, and it was an opportunity for both the Arab community and police to come together and start a dialogue and discuss some of the issues that Arab women and their families face in our region. Arab families in Waterloo region compare the Waterloo Regional Police Service now often with safety and security. When the Waterloo Region District Schools Board canceled the community police programs in schools, we received a lot of concerned phone calls from parents and community members fearing that this would negatively affect the safety of children and youth in our community and our school. Now we are seeing, more than before, the impact of this unwise decision in our schools and an increase of youth violent crime. I received a phone call from a friend of mine on Friday who was in Conestoga Mall when the recent robbery happened. She mentioned how she was very proud of the professionalism of the police, especially when they start evacuating the mall, and how she felt so proud and so safe that nothing bad will happen with people in the mall because of the police. These are just a few examples of our experience with the police service. The answer is not upstream against the police and not the police against upstream. It should be working together with the police to find a solution. If we want an upstream solution, how about pressuring our government, our MPs, to change the justice system? How about the bail system? Do you want an upstream solution? How about changing our community culture to encourage parents and family to be more involved in their children's lives? Because some of our troubles and challenges that we see in our community start within the family dynamic. I know it is a very difficult decision on everybody here, but we really have a trust in your decision. We know in our community we are facing a lot of affordability, community crisis, affordability of housing crisis, homelessness.
Thank you,
But,
Asma.
oh, it's done. I just only have one small line. If I can finish it, please. Last one. Okay, just like one. Finally, I have to realize that it's not the police against us or us against the police. It is us as a community coming together to work towards a community where everyone belongs and where everyone feels safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to call now on Gabriel Quindamo from Waterloo, appearing virtually. You've got 5 minutes to speak.
Hello, Council. Good evening, members. My name is Gabriel Quindamo. I'm a student studying at Wilfrid Laurier University. But today I stand before you as a concerned citizen of this community. And I'm here eagerly to address the issues of homeless encampments within our region, specifically the one on 100 Victoria Street. So homelessness is a growing problem, not just in Waterloo, but across the country. It is imperative that we come together to find a solution. The presence of homeless encampments in our region is a clear indication that we have failed to provide adequate support for those in need. These encampments are not just a burden to our community, but they pose a serious health and safety risk for those living there. Now, as a community, we must acknowledge that homelessness is not a choice, but rather a result of complex issues that can include poverty, mental illness, and addiction. But it is not enough to simply just clear out these encampments and move the problem elsewhere. Now, I understand that a recent court ruling went against any issues of an eviction notice, but the reason for that was because of the lack of inadequate housing to house these people at these encampments. Yes, the shelter system has worked for now, but it is at capacity. And instead of investing more money into increasing the shelter system, we should focus on creating a budget in order to create affordable housing specifically for those homeless. Now, we must also improve access to support services to those in need, including mental health, addiction support, and job training programs, in order to break the cycle of homelessness. As food prices continue to soar and housing prices as well, we need to create a system in order to negate the increasement of these of homeless encampments, and that will be through affordable housing. More of the budget placed into solving this problem we have, and I eager you to continue to lobby for that. I'm going to keep it short. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. I'll call upon Kelly Anthony of Waterloo, appearing in person. Kelly, you've got 5 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Redmond and Council. Thank you for inviting us to speak. And I'll start out by saying thanks to those whose passion, vocation, and avocation has become addressing the devastation of addiction and overdose. I joined them because I had no choice. My name is Kelly Anthony. I have a PhD in social psychology, and I teach in the School of Public Health at the University of Waterloo, where I have been for 18 years. I teach classes in the social determinants of health, and we talk a lot about addiction and overdose. I also come to you as a mom whose child, who's 26, is dying of addiction. Some may also know me as the voice on Waterloo Regional Crime Prevention Council, beseeching us to find ways of preventing suffering from addiction rather than ministering to it after it's happened. We know how to do it. Many of you were at my panel a few years ago on how Iceland did it and prevented their kids from dying of addiction. Portugal has done it, 25 years long. We have the roadmap in front of us, community connectedness, wraparound supports, contingency management. These are evidence-based, community reinforcement programs. We can do more than give my son clean drugs. The issues surrounding how we go forward to address the addiction and overdose crises have become deeply politicized. When something becomes a rigid ideology, expert dissenters, or just private citizens like me, find it hard or impossible to be heard. That was the reason that I hosted a panel this past summer that some of you may know of, but probably most of you do not. I invited a panel of international experts on the issue of decriminalization of drugs, including Portugal's drug architect, Dr. João Galão, along with international experts from Simon Fraser University, University of British Columbia, and the University of Toronto. They spoke with measured and evidence-based concerns that we may be going too far and too fast in terms of moving towards decriminalization without, as my colleague in the panel said, an off-ramp for where we go when we see the data. We have data, it's coming out right now. Oregon's decriminalized 2 years ago. We need to understand what's going on in Oregon is not good. They did exactly what we are proposing to do here, and overdose deaths have been going up for the past 2 years. We have that evidence. We also have comparative, naturally occurring experiments when we look at tobacco. Anybody sees an unmitigated success in moving from, when I was born, a glamorous, sexy habit that was killing millions of people a year, to today, and a little bit embarrassing habit that leaves you standing 20 meters from a building if you're going to smoke, and smoking rates have plummeted. We denormalized tobacco. That's what we did. That's how we successfully stopped the millions of people dying of tobacco, and the numbers continue to go down. Most places that have done decriminalization, places like Portugal, had massive infrastructure uptick and uptake. 2 solid years Portugal spent planning to decriminalize in terms of getting treatment and prevention and families and governments on board. Oregon did not do that, and Oregon is failing. 2 large studies found we're looking at massive increases in child hospitalizations and poisonings from cannabis. I actually was a supporter of legalizing cannabis. We were wrong. We're now seeing the devastation as we see much, much higher rates of THC than the cannabis we thought we were legalizing. Children are dying because they're getting a hold of gummies and cannabis substances. Keith Humphreys is of the respected Stanford Lancet Commission on Addiction, and he said, if Oregon continues on its path of not complementing effective harm reduction with strong prevention and treatment, it should expect rising drug use, addiction, and harms in the community.
46 seconds.
Over the past, I've had to call 911 over 8 times at fear of either for my life or for my dying son. I went on a site that I share with 39,000 other mothers of addicts across North America, and I said, my son is incarcerated again. And they said, thank God, maybe there's a chance he'll get help. I beseech you all to listen to not only what you are hearing, but what you are not. There is a wealth of information on issues of decriminalization and legalization. You are not hearing it. You didn't hear about my panel. You'll have to find other ways to get that information. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kelly. Kelly, I've got a question for you or a point of clarification from Councillor Deutschman.
Sure thing.
Yeah, thank you for your information. Thank you for your comments on decriminalization. I found it interesting. I was trying to follow whether you were supportive or not, but it sounded like there has to be good treatment systems in place for success to occur. So I was just wondering about the recent BC changes, so I thought you'd be a good person to maybe comment on what you thought about what they're doing there.
Yeah, I for one, I'm not sure that they weren't following Portugal. We do not want to criminalize addicts. Everyone agrees with that. No one wants to criminalize people taking drugs. But we have not followed Portugal. We have not followed Iceland. We're not watching Oregon rolling out in front of us. So I have deep concerns about what's happening in BC.
Is that because they don't have treatment support?
Absolutely. Yes. Deaths have gone down 47% in Alberta because they're moving towards treatment and prevention as their priorities. I can't speak to the city. I can just speak to the province of Alberta that's seen an extraordinary reductions in deaths.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Next, we have Mark Egers, President of the Waterloo Region Police Association. Mark will be joining virtually. Mark, good evening. You have 5 minutes.
Good evening, and thank you for having me today. The WRPA is the elected unifying voice of over 1,100 sworn and civilian police personnel who proudly dedicate their lives to serving all communities within Waterloo Region. And I'm honored to serve as president and advocate on behalf of our members. As the 2023 budget is debated, I would ask that you please keep this presentation and current state of public safety in mind. The region is expanding twofold, urban and rural, and both have their complexities. Urban expansion and its associated call demand is soaring and unrelenting. There are simply not enough uniformed officers to respond to calls for service, which undermines the community's faith that the police will arrive in a timely fashion when needed. Behind the scenes and often overlooked are the communications personnel, who are also understaffed. They not only manage calls from the public, often at their worst time, but they also receive complaints when officers can't respond quickly enough. There are lifeline to officers on the road, but if they are understaffed, it compromises both officer and public safety. At the same time, rural growth is occurring at a rapid pace, yet we are still servicing these areas with the same number of resources as was allocated in the 1980s, over 40 years ago. And just think about how much has changed in that time. Our rural communities have made it clear they want a greater emphasis on public safety. In the last municipal election, it was one of the main political platform topics, and all candidates who supported enhancing the police presence in these growing parts of the region ended up being elected. Now I'm going to dive into the data. Stats Canada reported that in 2021, Waterloo region experienced its highest total crime and severe crime rates when compared to the last 5 years. Our violent crime severity index also rose by 2%. Unsurprisingly, this has resulted in caseloads becoming unmanageable, which dramatically increases the risk of burnout and exposure to excessive traumatic events. Compared to the 12 other large municipal services in Ontario, WRPS has the lowest weighted clearance rates for total and violent crime, and is also well below national weighted clearance rates. The declines in these rates over the years have been attributed to resource challenges in the investigative service division, as well as workload demand per officer, which again highlights the greater risk that our members could be prone to higher rates of burnout and possible escalating mental health related challenges. The WRPS staffing data shows that in 2021, Waterloo Region had 127 officers per 100,000 people. This is 12% below the average Big 12 rate in Ontario, 28% below the median provincial rate, and over 30% below the national rate. As increase in staffing is required, put another way, simply we're in crisis, and we desperately need more human resources to protect the ones we have. The wellness of our members must be paramount to ensure a healthy and reliable workforce. In both loud and quiet ways, we are experiencing the impacts of this chronic staffing shortage, and it simply cannot continue. Unfortunately, the recent tragic murders of 5 officers in September is a dark reminder of the dangers our members face every day. It further emphasizes the need for a commitment to safe staffing levels. It's important to note that public perception of this as well. Traffic enforcement is one of the main issues that gets reported as a concern from the community. If they don't see our personnel monitoring school zones or maintaining a presence on our streets to deter dangerous driving, they question what their tax dollars are used for. WRPS's staffing levels are so low that for the most part, proactive traffic enforcement is non-existent. This further erodes public's confidence in the police. And we know that we have an already uphill battle to climb. I commend this current Police Services Board and Chief Crowell for recognizing our current staffing shortage during the most recent PSB meeting. Now is the time to fix it. And I'm here to reiterate that position to Council. Our members cannot wait 3 years to get up to complement. We need a large investment in this immediate budget to guarantee the safety of the public and our members. We need 55 now, and I believe 19 is the ask. It's on our members' backs and the public's backs to get there. As WRPA president, I do not take lightly my responsibility to advocate strongly for the collective rights and interests of our members, and I want to publicly thank them in this forum for all that they do 24/7, 365 days a year. Everything I've highlighted today comes down to the need for more human resources supported by a dedicated investment. This must be an integral part of our path forward.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Mark. I will now call on Roz Gunn and Jennifer Gordon to speak. They will be appearing virtually. Good evening, Roz and Jennifer. You have 5 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Roz Gunn, and I'm the Director of Communications and Advocacy at YWCA Cambridge.
And I'm Jennifer Gordon. I'm the Director of Advocacy with the YW Kitchener-Waterloo. Together, Ross and I, our organizations represent 220 years of work in women's issues in this region. We represent the full spectrum of services supporting women around housing, homelessness, from prevention work around poverty to gender-based violence to emergency shelter and supportive housing. What we know from this work, which is supported by our Project Willow research, which you received in your packages, is that women's homelessness is different from men's. Our community, however, in budgets and planning and execution of services, still prioritizes narratives that support men's experiences and relies on the myths that women are less likely to experience homeless. And for those who do, their needs are the same as men. This just isn't the case. Project Willow, the majority of women experiencing homelessness in our region experience gender-based violence at the alarming rate of twice a week, 72%. And that violence can come from a variety of sources and perpetrators. It comes to them in a variety of different forms in almost every community setting. This layered experience of violence causes an ongoing state of vulnerability, of constant trauma, and it has become the key definer of the experience of women's homelessness in Waterloo region. Yet, even with the skeletal model and resource scarcity that currently makes up our one exclusively women's shelter in this region, shelter is still where women feel safer in lieu of housing. And this is where we're asking you to invest.
We're here to speak to two priorities we see with respect to women's homelessness and Budget 2023. The first is following Councillor Doug Craig's recent memo to Council, the need for a women's shelter at minimum in Cambridge. And the second is an enhancement of resources for the existing women's shelter in Kitchener to finally meet the emotional, physical, psychological, and social needs of its service users. In our Project Willow research, 73% of participants reported that they actively avoided co-ed shelters, citing safety concerns such as the risk of encountering an abuser. Further, 61% used region-supported prevention and diversion services to remain in violent housing situations that felt safer than an option like a co-ed shelter. Further, we know that for many individuals, leaving their communities and existing support networks is not a viable option, which means they are faced with the decision to sleep rough or stay in violent relationships and homes, or risk their safety and attempt staying at a co-ed shelter, which occupancy rates at Cambridge's co-ed shelter will show is an option almost no women choose. This is a pattern and a trend. It's not speculation. We do know this. Cambridge is a service desert for women experiencing homelessness and resulting gender-based violence. Outside of domestic violence shelter, which has a specific mandate to access, the only shelter option is a co-ed shelter. We need to recognize that this is not good enough. Co-ed shelters are simply not safe for women. Staying at a co-ed shelter or being on their own on the streets cannot be the only two options women in Cambridge have. To support this work, we are in the early stages of working with invested parties in Cambridge to develop a prototype of a continuum of support for women experiencing homelessness, anchoring that continuum with shelter on one side and supportive housing on the other. And that is to say, we're eager and willing partners in finding the right solutions to addressing the gendered housing and homelessness crisis in Cambridge.
To respond to this layered experience of violence that I brought up that characterizes women's homelessness, we need to do better by our current shelter models for women as well. At the YWKW, we're eager to move beyond the bare bones notion of a shelter being a roof over heads and move towards a model that can change outcomes for vulnerable women. Waterloo region needs a shelter system that is responsive to the needs of those who access it, as well as those who are most likely to avoid shelter, including racialized Muslim women, Indigenous women, trans, and gender diverse folks. And the 61% of Project Willow participants who have used prevention and diversion services to stay in abusive living situations just to avoid being homeless and having to use Waterloo region's shelters. Participants called to keep the shelters current. So participants within our research, the women utilizing our services, I should qualify that, have called to keep the shelter's current 24/7 model ongoing, as they felt it has aided significantly in their safety, but they want to see better services that reflect their needs. We cannot do that without more resource support. This includes more staff support, 24/7 mental health and physical health support, access to basic needs, a staffed safe place for substance use, recreation and life skills programming, healing services, and spiritual support. We want to end with a quote from one of our participants who bravely shared their story in this research. "You do not know how much actual physical, emotional, and financial trauma that each one of us has gone through before we've been able to have the strength and courage to walk through these shelter doors." Okay? Because unless you've been through it yourself, then you don't know. What we're asking from the region is to step up and represent women's homelessness in a way that allows women to continue forward towards housing and supports our resources that are showing up for women in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Roz and Jennifer. I have a question of clarification from Councillor James.
Yes, thank you for presenting. Just a question in terms of your ask. So I just want to make sure we're clear. One is for women's shelter within Cambridge specifically, and then you've asked for additional resources. Do you have a dollar amount for that you've identified?
We don't have a dollar amount, but one of the indications that would be considered, we have a budgetary ask in that is something that will help us extend our services in an ongoing way from a 24/7 support. As a bare minimum, what we're suggesting is to be able to meet that requirement, as women were significantly utilizing that service in order to avoid violence that was coming to them in the community from a variety of different spaces. Further to that, we are more asking for a general oversight into about shelter resourcing that considers the needs of women from our Project Willow research in a more substantial way and encouraging that women's narrative to come through.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Wolf.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Can you further define the difference between men and women's homelessness and also the need for perhaps a dry shelter for women?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Wolf. First, I'll just note that my internet's unstable, so if I get muted or stopped, Jen, I'll lean on you. The first problem with women's homelessness is that it's often invisible, and this contributes to a prevailing misconception that women experience homelessness in far smaller numbers, and they just don't. The Women's National Housing and Homelessness Network recently undertook the largest pan-Canadian study of homelessness among women and gender diverse people in Canada, and the findings confirm what advocates have long said. They find that women are more likely to rely on relational, precarious, and dangerous supports to survive housing instability and are less likely to appear in shelters, co-ed spaces, and public spaces due to perceived and real risks to their safety. They're also more likely to negotiate a number of high-risk survival strategies to obtain shelter and avoid the dangers of the streets and co-ed shelter spaces, including by staying in unsafe and exploitative relationships and exchanging sex for shelter. And because women experiencing homelessness tend to avoid public spaces, their homelessness is essentially invisible. But we're here to make it abundantly clear that even though we don't see them, they are everywhere. And to speak to the dry shelter, Jen, I don't know if you would like to jump in on that.
Yeah, I think one of the struggles with having a singular women's shelter within our region is the idea of this one roof model that's supposed to be able to cater to everyone's needs. So we already know that that drug use is very much connected to the homeless experience. Within our shelter, it's a prominent activity, but at the exact same time, in relation to what Roz talked about in terms of hidden homelessness, we also know that there are folks where drug use being around them, whether they're recovering and or that's not an environment that will aid in their process towards housing, will actively avoid shelter exclusively. So I would say that within a one roof model, you will miss people. I can't talk to you about the statistics around anything with dry shelter. However, I will say that with a one roof model where a sort of catch basket where all women are supposed to be able to use this one singular service, that there will be dominant groups that make it difficult. And if there is drug use happening, someone who is in need of a dry environment is going to struggle in that environment, right? So I think we need to step away from this idea that just one shelter can speak to everyone's needs along the spectrum of women who would need to utilize shelter in a crisis situation.
Councillor Craig.
Well, through you, Mr. Chair. Roz, I'm just wondering, I'm trying to get an idea of the numbers in Cambridge. And is there a ratio between men and women in homelessness? Is it 3 to 1, 4 to 1? Can you give me an idea of what you're seeing on the ground? So as we work towards doing something, we have an idea of what we need.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Craig. We don't have the numbers, and that's by and large because of how invisible it is. But we do have some national stats that help paint a picture of a picture that would help us sort of understand what it probably looks like in Cambridge. And I guess one thing, sorry, that I meant to mention earlier was just that the way that we count homelessness right now, we're using point-in-time counts and shelter occupancy. And because women's homelessness is invisible, largely speaking, they're not picked up in that data. So any data that is available, it's not going to be representative. It's not going to paint a full picture. But what we know from the WNHHN Women's National Housing and Homelessness Network research that I referenced earlier is that 21% of single mothers in Canada raise their children in poverty. 7% of women have experienced hidden homelessness at some point in their lives. 28% of women-led households are in core housing need, and that's compared to 16% of male-led families. So taking this all together, we can't measure it, but we know that it is a serious problem.
Okay, Pam and I will be in touch.
Councillor Deutschman.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair Harris. So what is the ask? Like, do we have that, or is that coming? Just so we know, because this is the time that if you have a specific dollar amount, this is the time to let us know what it is.
It's hard to put a number on something when there's nothing existing in Cambridge to say we want an investment to improve these services. Right now, we don't have dollar amounts, but we know that we need a shelter at bare minimum in Cambridge. And we know that the women's shelter in Kitchener-Waterloo is under-resourced. So I apologize that we don't have more specific numbers, but that's our ask.
If there's interest in that, we can get you specific numbers. I think part of our argument was to get women's homelessness on the table, which you have all very much wholeheartedly brought.
You've muted yourself, Jen.
Sorry, and other entities. So we can look at some numbers. I think part of it is understanding, back to the Craig's comment, when the numbers aren't there, how do you understand the demand? And so part of the conversation, in terms particularly with Cambridge and understanding that prototyping activity, is how do we start to invest in this solution by understanding that if we build it, who comes, right? Knowing the fact that there are people to come to it. So by all means, we can get some numbers together for you folks that reflect a little bit more about what those steps would be from this budget council.
Yeah, just to say, if you want it, you have to tell us what the number is, right? Obviously you've built the case for the need, but we need to know the number. So if you can put something together soon, we can deal with it, or else we can deal with it later on, but it won't be part of this budget. Okay,
Absolutely.
Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roz and Jennifer. I'll call on Brian Enns, who I believe will be appearing in person. Brian. Sorry, Brian, going to pause. I've got another question for the previous delegation, Jan Liggett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do understand that there's a need in our Cambridge community. I'm also troubled by the fact that you're appearing before us, but there's no meat here for us to make any decisions on. And I think Councillor Deutschman has given you some very good advice going forward. But I have a question. Are you working with the Women's Crisis Center in Cambridge on Acorn?
Yeah, Women's Crisis is definitely connected to the work that we do with women's homelessness. The difference being that they have a very select criteria for what constitutes women who can access their services, and rightfully so within the mandate of their funding and goals of their programming. It will respond to some women who experience homelessness, but it will not fit the mass of women who experience homelessness. And so what we're trying to do is create a Cambridge system that can be responsive to women who aren't necessarily first in a housing and domestic violence situation in order to be able to easily access those services.
Just
Ross,
to follow
you can add anything
up, to follow up, Mr. Chair. But are you? I know you know who they are and you connect with them. But are you including? Are they part of? Like, are you using them as a partner in any way?
I'm in terms of to what context? Like we're part of the domestic assault response group. You know, we there's people that shuffle between shelters.
Sure,
we support within our emergency shelter.
I'm thinking of
a little bit more.
I'm thinking of their expertise. They probably have some good connections for you, and I know they struggle for funding as well. I'm just wondering if there could be some symbiotic partnership there. That's all.
Thank you
I
for the
think you-
suggestion.
Yes, thank you very much. It's worth pursuing for sure.
Thank you, Roz and Jennifer. Seeing no other questions, I will move to Brian Enns. Brian, thanks for coming tonight. You've got 5 minutes.
Good evening, and thank you very much for allowing me to participate in this budget process. I'll just wait a second here. Okay, my name is Brian Entz. I grew up in Elmira. I'm currently living in Uptown Waterloo. Our regional budget and plan reflects our community's identity. How we spend our money and set priorities are a reflection of how we see ourselves. The words reflect our vision for the future and our identity. And the budget increases and decreases reflect what we think is important. The Waterloo region is known for innovation and applying the right solutions to meet community needs, ION being a great example of that. So I'll give you two aspects of identity of the Waterloo region. In 1974, probation officers asked a judge to allow 2 men to meet the victims of their alcohol-fueled property damage instead of a prison term. Using methods which were already known by generations of First Nations, these 2 local visionaries set the foundation for a global movement for restorative justice, which focuses on addressing the root causes of conflict. The other aspect is ION itself. We're a growing community, and we needed a long-term solution to build the right infrastructure for transit. We had many options which were cheaper and quicker. Our regional council and the community took the bold approach to build a light rail system. We saw the failures of other cities, such as Ottawa's bus system, decided on ION, which is now a model for other cities. So to keep those 2 aspects in mind, those bold decisions that we made as a community. So what are people saying about policing? How will more police prevent crime? They only get involved afterwards. Why do the police have little accountability for budget when other departments have much more? And people of color and First Nations have a difficult relationship with police services. What is the path to justice and accountability there? So I've got an analogy for you. I like analogies. They're helpful to talk about difficult problems. We live in a house which has a leak coming through, a leak from the roof. It's coming through the ceilings in the rooms in the house. As we expand the house, the leaks spread into more rooms. We have a drywall repair company come in to fix the ceilings. We spend more money as the house expands, and the company offers better drywall and even fancy technical monitoring of the damage. The budget to fix the leaks increases every year. Now, why would we choose to spend more money on criminal punishments instead of focusing on the social, economic determinants of criminal behavior? What bold decisions will this council make to ensure the well-being of a community broken by poverty and homelessness? 10% of our population experiencing poverty. Now, what about housing? What are people saying about housing? Housing is a right. We need housing for everyone. Stable, affordable housing is important for the well-being of our communities most vulnerable, and investment companies are buying the majority of new housing stock. So we need bold action from regional government. Many of the incentives to increase the availability of affordable housing have been nullified by investment companies scooping up housing supply. As long as there's a profit incentive, individuals and government will not be able to outbid the large investment companies. We need regional government to use existing or available land to build affordable housing, bypassing the open market. So one idea that I really liked is St. Paul's Evangelical Lutheran Church, corner of Urban Lancaster. There are many church congregations which are closing down or looking to share properties. The region should work with the cities to identify these properties. Or churches such as St. Paul's, which decided how could they help? How could they fulfill, help people in their community? And so they have their church now.
1 minute.
So the time now is for bold action. We need it now. We need to reconsider police budget increases and consider all possibilities for affordable housing property. In conclusion, I've asked you to consider who we are as a community, whether we make decisions on the budget based on fear or hope. I hear a lot of fear around the police budget. And so let's agree it should be hope rather than fear. reconsider the police budget, spend time and money on how to house everyone in our community, and be bold in your hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I'd like to now call upon Martin Asling and Damien McHale, Waterloo Region Yes in My Backyard. They are appearing virtually. Martin and Damien, you've got 5 minutes. Good evening.
Thank you, Council and staff, for letting us speak here tonight. This region is one of Ontario's wealthiest, but with an Achilles heel when it comes to homelessness and lack of housing stability. We are not alone in feeling that way. Next slide, please. Housing and homelessness are by far the most pressing issues according to residents, as reported by the region's own random sample poll. Combined housing and homelessness represent a majority of responses at 55%. We should also note that 43%, a plurality of region residents polled, want to increase taxes only enough to keep up with inflation in order to maintain services. However, what does it mean to maintain or expand housing services? From the point of view of the service user, there's not as much affordable housing as there used to be, because here we're not just counting the total stock, but the stock relative to the expanding need. When considering if we are investing enough, we must also take into account the increased affordable housing need in our region, reflected in large and rising affordable housing wait lists, 20-year low vacancy rates, and large and rising, as best we can tell, rates of homelessness. Homelessness is not acceptable in any community, particularly a wealthy community like Waterloo Region. The rental vacancy rate in Waterloo Region is at its lowest in 20 years, at around 1%. Low vacancy rates are correlated with high market rents and homelessness as well, and it's evidence of a housing shortage. Such a housing market puts more pressure on our non-market housing stock to make housing affordable for people. It suggests that the social housing waitlist will continue to rise unless we take very concerted action. Meanwhile, according to publicly available regional data, next slide please, over a 10-year period, the number of total households housed has been well below the number on the waitlist and even new applications. Next slide, thank you. Also, according to the region's point-in-time count, there were 1,005 people experiencing homelessness in Waterloo Region in 2021, up from 333 counted in 2018, partly due to different ways of counting, but partly due to an increase in homelessness.
Spending on housing has been shown to limit the need for spending in other areas such as policing and prisons. We chose to highlight a quite cautious paper to buttress our case for the significant housing first cost offsets to the region or other levels of government. Elliot Cohen found that 50 to 100% of average program costs are offset by corresponding benefits in the medium and long term respectively. Cost offsets to other levels of government matter too, given that we all work together for the same goal. However, cost offsets are not by any stretch the main case for investing in ending homelessness. Indeed, if we look at stories behind such offsets, we see huge improvements in people's quality of lives that are not easily inserted into cost-benefit analyses. Housing First works, but we have to scale it with enough housing. Canada as a whole remains so far behind in this regard that a recent Scotiabank report points out that we need to double our social housing stock to reach the peer average. Clearly, the region can't address the discrepancy alone, but we can contribute to doing our part. Finland is the only European nation to see a decrease in homelessness. To make this work, Finland ensures its Housing First strategy maintains a significant stockpile of housing. It is time for Waterloo Region to truly commit to a strategy which has been proven to work. At the time of the creation of the Waterloo Region Housing Master Plan from 2020 to 2040, Waterloo Region Housing operated 2,722 affordable homes, compared to Hamilton's 7,000 with comparable population. If we include all affordable units, this planned increase in affordable homes would mean that by the end of construction, there would be approximately 2,000 less units in Waterloo Region than the 2018 level in Hamilton. Finland has 7,000 to 9,000 units built of social housing every year, with a population of about 10 times the size of Waterloo Region, even having virtually eliminated living rough homelessness. In contrast, Waterloo Region plans on building, on average, 500 new affordable housing units per year, only a proportion of which will be social housing. To begin closing this gap, we recommend an additional 1,100 units in affordable housing in the next 5 years. This increased housing stock should be directed directed solely to the development of a housing first initiative based on the successes of cities such as Helsinki. Ideally, financing for this program should be diverse, with a combination of options like provincial and federal grants, loans, CHMC and/or commercial, and property taxes. However, we should ensure that we do everything in our power as a region to fund as much housing and supports as we can, no matter what. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin and Damien, for your presentation. I'd like to now call upon Andrew Jacob Reinhardt of Waterloo. They'll be appearing in person. Andrew, good evening. You have 5 minutes.
Hello. I don't have anything too formally prepared. I just thought it would maybe be more honest to be off the cuff. But the reason why I'm here tonight is because I am a graduate from one of our local universities, and I'm a working artist in the area. And I would love to stay here, but if my landlord raises my rent, I'm pretty sure I'm out of here. And so I just have a few things that I wanted to say and mention, because I know that when we have difficult budgets, arts are easy to not consider or not consider a high priority. I know that our region has a vision of being a world-class community, and I believe that that's only achieved through our arts and our culture, and everything else. We need that infrastructure there, of course, so I get that we are easy to put on a lower priority. But I do have one number, which is $449,724. That's the number of dollars that the Waterloo Region Arts Fund was able to distribute to artists in the region over the year 2022. If you divide that number in two, you'll get 2,204, or you'll get close to 224,096, which is the salary for our chief of police. I'm not here to just rag on the police and their budget, but if the chief of police's budget is half that for the entire arts community, I think that we're underinvesting in us, and that makes me feel undervalued, and it's difficult to stay here. The amount of money that was requested by the Arts Council was $1.4 million, 35,000. So they award about 30 cents on what's requested. I also just wanted to mention that we bring in funding from all levels of government. In the year after I graduated, I was able to secure a little under $80,000 of funding from all levels of government, which was entirely spent in Waterloo Region. With that said, though, we're still super poor. I didn't make 20K last year. So all of that money that I did bring in from different levels of government was spent on mostly on skilled labor, on rental facilities in the region, and a little bit on materials. So for those reasons, I think that, we're good people to have around. We make people happy. And I think that there's a huge benefit to moving through beautiful spaces. And our public spaces should be beautiful. A little bit more on who I am. I also ride a bike everywhere I go. I don't have a driver's license, so that's why I do that. It also saves me a lot of money so that I am able to stay here. I went to the Waterloo strategic meeting, or strategic planning meeting a couple weeks ago, and I met a guy named Dennis. He had an interesting thing to say about bike lanes as a driver, that if we're going to tear up these roads, why are we just painting a lane when we know nobody's going to use it? And he was quite aggravated at this as a driver and as somebody that was actually initially talking about how he feels undervalued as a driver, which I thought was fun. But anyway, it was cool to meet an ally in Dennis. Other things here. Oh yeah, so in the process of housing, I know that we talk a lot about affordable housing. I think we need to be thinking about deeply affordable housing. I mentioned I might be out of here if it comes September, but the rent goes up, and I don't want that. So we not only need like our bare minimum amount of housing, but we need to actively be driving down the cost of rentals, and that requires a lot more ambition. I also just, from an economic perspective, earlier this year, we had the musical swings in Uptown Waterloo. Beautiful work by Daily Tous Les Jours. They're a Montreal-based artist collective. They also commissioned a study on their work and the economic impact, where they found that at worst, there was a 253% return on investment when this installation was in different cities. So that only comes with high-level investment. Beautiful spaces, artists are poor and have to leave the region. Oh, and if we're going to be getting two-way all-day go, I hope, or as we expand go, you know, we want to give Torontonians a reason to come here and not just KW people reasons to go there. We have really cool things like Lumen. I see I have 10 seconds left. We like when we have festivals like Lumen in Uptown Waterloo, it feels like the whole city's out there and we're all having a really good time. And these are things that bring community together and I think can be considered downstream ways of creating better communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. We are going to call on Cameron Dearlove, Executive Director of Porchlight Counseling and Addiction Services. Cameron, good evening, and I just want to advise those here in attendance that we will be taking a 10-minute break at 8:30. So we're not going to continue to drive on through. We are going to take a break. So Cameron, welcome this evening. You've got 5 minutes, and he's appearing virtually.
Hey, thank you very much for having me. My name is Cameron Dearlove, and I'm a resident of Cambridge. I'm here to speak on behalf of Porchlight Counseling and Addiction Services, where I'm honored to serve as the Executive Director. Our organization was founded in 1940 as the South Waterloo Family Service Bureau. In the 1960s, we became the Family Counseling Center of Cambridge and North Dumfries, and just last year, we evolved again to be Porchlight Counseling and Addiction Services. We are committed to the emotional well-being of people in Cambridge and North Dumfries, and we do this through community-based individual, child, and family counseling, rural outreach, and most recently through our addiction services program, including 15 beds of recovery living. We are well-networked and collaborate locally and with partners provincially. I'd love to tell you all about our organization and everything that we do, but with just a few minutes, I'm going to focus on our addiction services. These are just a few pictures of our addictions recovery home residents volunteering in the community, digging their own garden, and learning to make and sell jams and desserts at the farmer's market. This program has a long history in Cambridge, originally springing up through the Cambridge shelter about 15 years ago. It was originally funded by the region, but with some changes in funding parameters when the region shifted to a housing first model, the program lost its funding, so this is about 8 years ago. About 5 years ago, the Cambridge shelter made the difficult decision to close the program due to lack of funding. So in 2018, the Porchlight Board decided to adopt the program so that we wouldn't lose these vital, life-saving supports in Cambridge. Since then, we have been dodging closing the program due to lack of funding, starting with $36,000 in annual funding from the region of Waterloo, and most recently, we've been able to get some funding to create two safe beds, with funding coming to us through the House of Friendship. While the program is largely safe now, it would be a stretch to say that it's properly funded. But we do our best because we know that our community needs this and that the program works. Now, the question that we often get is if we are duplicating services, and the answer is no. We provide niche supports focused on people facing homelessness and addictions and other complexities such as involvement in the justice system. So the continuum on this slide is, of course, a simplified version of what people might experience. And rarely is it actually a linear progression, but to explain where we fit into this continuum. So to start out looking at change supports, these might help somebody access addiction programs and services. Typically, someone would talk to their primary care provider, call here 24/7 to access these services. But when people don't have a home, they usually don't have a phone number, and they're often very challenged to keep appointments. So we provide in-person case management and referral supports. We make a plan with people, we do required assessments, and help them get into detox and residential treatment. We will literally drive people to wherever their treatment will be in Ontario, whether it's at Windsor or wherever it might end up, and pick them up when they're done. When people reach the initial change step, they are accessing supports in the community, typically while they're waiting for a treatment bed. Next, they would go on to residential treatment, such as the House of Friendship locally, or wherever we might find a bed in the province. And then getting to recovery, this is the area that we focus on. We provide the only recovery home beds in Waterloo Region and also provide ongoing group supports to the community. We run 15 beds of recovery living, 9 for men and 6 for women. Here's the point of recovery living. If you're experiencing homelessness and you go off for detox and residential treatment, you then return to the community, but you're still experiencing homelessness, it will end up in shelter where you're surrounded by substance use. Instead, we bring folks into our homes where they can stay for up to 3 years. We have structure and requirements for residents, and they receive staff support and guidance to rebuild their lives. You can see, for example, that of 99 residents who entered and exited our homes, 0 entered with housing, while 79 exited with permanent housing. 0 entered employed, while 28 exited with a job. Many have completed their high school diplomas, have gone on to college, and even pursued PhDs. Many have regained custody of their children and reunited families. Simply, our homes give people a new chance and a new start. But we have a list and we want to do more. We've requested a funding increase from the Region of Waterloo for staffing support so we can expand our women's home and bring 3 to 5 more women per year out of shelter and off the streets and into safe and secure recovery living. We know that you have many requests and we know that we are a small program, but I do hope that you'll consider the different trajectory that the lives of these 3 to 5 women will take with this support. Through a donation from the 100 Men Who Give a Damn, we have the funds to rent a larger home and to pay for the furniture costs. But to add more residents, we need additional staffing support. So we're asking for an increase from $36,000 per year to $72,000 per year so we can support more women to rebuild their lives and from the experience of addiction.
Thank you, Cameron.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cameron. Councillor Craig.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Cameron, and I'm pleased that you've made the presentation tonight. If I look at the Cambridge community in particular, what are the needs? I mean, you're talking 3 beds. What do you see in the future in terms of what the real needs are?
Yeah, that's a great question. It is difficult to measure exactly what the needs are. You know, our program, sort of going back to when Jen Gordon from the YW and Roz Gunn from the YWCA were speaking. It can be difficult to assess what the needs are, but also, the one thing that Jen said about, that idea of one roof will serve everybody. Our program is not for everybody. We run, our homes are abstinence-based, and so it's not, the right environment for everybody. I know that, our wait list is between 1 and 2 years to get into one of our houses. And that's, without a lot of publicity, right? That's just through the networks that we have of people making referrals to us. I would say that recovery homes are quite rare. There aren't a lot of them in the province, even though they're such an impactful investment, because we put all kinds of money into, helping people get into treatment and go through that process. But then, what supports do we have when they arrive back into the community? And that's sort of where we come in. So, what's the actual need? I mean, we could, right now we have, 9 beds for men. We have 6 for women. We're hoping to have 9 and 9. What's the actual need? We could open 2 more houses and fill them up and keep them full.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Huanick.
Through you, Chair. Thank you very much for your presentation. You referred to something called a safe justice bed. I don't know much about what that is. Are you able to summarize it quickly and how it differs from other addiction services?
Yeah, so the safe justice bed, we've been able to kind of weave it into the houses that we're running. I mean, part of the benefit to it is that they're funded beds, and we have 15 beds. We have 4 that are funded, so that's definitely a bonus. This funding actually came to us through the House of Friendship and in partnership with the Working Center. When we didn't have funding for our program, it was a bit at risk, and they stepped in to help us. So the point of these beds are to create a safe space for somebody who has involvement in the justice system and needs a safe place to recover. So, for example, we sometimes will take people directly from GVCI or Vanier, for example. So people who are exiting, but they're very kind of flexible beds that we're able to use. And it's a really nice partnership because the Working Center has some of these beds in Kitchener. We have some in Cambridge now. And so, starting to get spread out around the region. And then we also have, different they're different styles of home, right? So I mentioned that ours is abstinence-based. So if somebody wants an abstinence-based environment, then perfect. We have that bed available for them. And, if not, then they might go somewhere else. So, it's adding options, which I think is really important.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Erb.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Cameron, for your presentation. And you may have answered part of my question in response to Councillor Hunick. But so what's the difference between what Porch Light does and what the addiction center that the House of Friendship operates on Concession Street in Cambridge? What's the difference?
Yeah, so that's sort of that continuum that I was referring to, where so I'll give an example. So if somebody is currently experiencing homelessness and they have an addiction that they want to recover from, so we provide what I call community-based case management. So yes, you could call here 24/7, make an appointment, do the assessments, and they do a great job with that. For somebody experiencing homelessness, we're there in person, right? We have an office just 2 blocks away from 150 Main in Galt, 2 blocks away from the Cambridge shelter. So really good location for people to be able to walk in. They can do their assessment in person. And what we would do then is help them to access detox. So that's often kind of step one. We often help them, finding housing in that interim period while they're waiting for treatment. So with the House of Friendship, for example, their treatment center in Cambridge, what they would do is that would be a residential treatment. So somebody would go stay there for a period of time, work through the program, and work through some of the sources of where this addiction comes from. Then they would be released from that program. Now, if you're still experiencing homelessness, then where would you go next, right? You'd probably go back to shelter. So we're kind of that next step for somebody where they don't have somewhere to go, and likely would be going right back to the same the same people, the same places that they were active in their addiction. So instead, they can come and live in our homes. And so it's not, strictly addictions treatment. It is support in maintaining sobriety, maintaining that recovery. And then it's also support in rebuilding your life in the community. And I stress in the community because that's, one of the really important pieces is that, none of us are entirely independent, right? We rely on other people. We rely on our community. And, so we have certain stipulations about being in the home. So, for example, the first 90 days, you're not working, you're focused on your recovery, you're attending meetings in the community. You need to do 90 meetings in 90 days. And part of the reason for that is that you meet people, you get networked, you develop relationships that you'll rely on, so that when you do leave our home, you have a community that's supporting you. And then, of course, we have employment and housing supports and other supports to help people to move forward in their lives.
I have a follow-up, if I may, Mr. Chair. So would you refer people to the House of Friendship Addiction Center?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we work very closely with them. And so, just the nature of treatment and trying to get people into treatment beds. People don't go exclusively to the House of Friendship. When there's a bed available, we take it. If there's not a bed available, then we look at other locations in the province. It's just the way that treatment works, is that it's not specifically localized, though our program is localized.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cameron. I'd like to now call upon Robin Beckett of Woolwich, appearing in person. Robin, good evening. Welcome. You have 5 minutes to speak.
Hello, my name is Robin, and I would like to talk about the police budget.
for the region and why it makes sense to reject the proposed increase to the police budget and reallocate the funds to services that improve community safety and public health. A bit about myself first. I was born and raised in Elmira, and I now currently work in public health research. Having grown up in Elmira, I didn't question the police, like many people from Elmira. I assumed they were necessary for community safety. Myself being white and middle class, I never had any run-ins with them. And up until about 5 years ago, if anyone proposed defunding the police, I would have thought that was impractical and dangerous. But through studying and working in public health and from hearing stories from people who live in surveilled communities, I've started to see things differently. I've started to understand that police are simply in complete opposition to community safety and public health for several reasons, and a couple I'll talk about now. Waterloo Regional Police use what they call community policing to permanently surveil and control racialized, disabled, and poor people. Community policing involves things like neighborhood watch programs, school resource officers, and carding. When I first heard about the concept of community policing, I didn't question it. It sounds positive, relationship-oriented, and about working with the community to keep people safe. And living where I did in Elmira, I never experienced it. But we need to look at and accept the reality of how community policing in Waterloo Region and across Canada actually plays out. The quantitative data and the stories of people living in these surveilled communities show us this reality. The data tells us that in Waterloo Region, carding disproportionately targets Black people. In fact, police are 4 times more likely to stop you if you're Black. The Canadian Medical Association Journal released an article on why many doctors want to defund the police. In it, Samir Bool, a Toronto med student and child of Ethiopian refugees, describes his childhood living in fear of police. He describes how he was carded 12 times in 1 year growing up in northwestern Ontario, and how this constant surveillance impacts your psyche. Samir, along with other doctors across Ontario, formed the group Doctors for Defunding to urge governments to redistribute police funding to social services. They are concerned about police response to people experiencing mental health crises. To paraphrase these doctors, when people are in crises, they need care services, not confrontation with an armed officer. Policing is inherently violent, and no amount of reform will result in police officers being able to provide the space and care required. In the article on COVID-19 and the threat of community policing in Waterloo Region, Fitzum Argai asks, why do the police get unfettered access to youth through these programs if the goal of community policing is truly to build relationships and reduce the behaviors that hurt kids and their communities? Wouldn't it make more sense to use an approach that avoids criminalization? If we care about people in crisis and the well-being of communities, then we need to reallocate the money away from police and towards community services that research shows improve safety and public health. The ACB network of Waterloo Region recently released a letter that provides a helpful map for what could be funded if we reallocate money away from police. One thing we could do is improve public transportation and make it affordable. We could expand services and reduce fare rates. We could also put money towards making sure all members of our community have safe housing. It could also go towards intercultural, community-led mental health support programs. Waterloo Region also deserves cultural centers and services that reflect the people who live here and the history that is constantly overlooked. Another thing we could do is use the money to create a Black cultural center representing histories like the Queens Bush settlement, which was a settlement of free and formerly enslaved Black people who built communities and farmland around Peel and Wellesley townships, particularly in Glen Allen, Hawksville, and Wallenstein. Over and over, the research shows that policing is contradictory to the well-being of communities and to public health, and that what we need is to invest in social services. I want to be a part of a Waterloo Region where communities and people are allowed to live and prosper with dignity and opportunity, but the current police budget does not allow for that. I urge all councillors to reject the proposed increase to the budget. I urge you to review the letter from the ACB network and consider how the region can invest in a supportive and healthy community.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you.
I'll now call upon, actually, Meg Rattan of Kitchener was unable to attend. She has submitted her submission attached to the agenda. If you want to read Meg Rattan's submission. Janice Jim, appearing in person. I will now call upon Janice Jim. You've got 5 minutes. Good evening.
Good evening, Chairman Redmond and members of Regional Council. I'm speaking today to bring attention to snow clearing issues at GRT and LRT stops. In recent weeks, a number of residents have delegated to the Waterloo City Council regarding sidewalk snow clearing. One of the problem areas was uncleared snow and icy conditions at transit stops, which are maintained by the region. As part of my delegation, I have submitted a few photos from the recent storm. Examples of the problems are big snowbanks that have to be climbed over at stops or ice-covered bus stops. If you check Twitter, there were numerous posts after the recent storm that highlighted the conditions that residents dealt with. The region strives to be equitable and inclusive. The Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act states that organizations are obligated to identify, remove, and prevent barriers so that persons with disabilities can access and participate in activities within the community. Inaccessible transit stops present a challenge not just to persons with disabilities, it impacts a broad range of transit users. When transit stops are inaccessible after a storm, some of the impacted users are seniors, seniors with mobility devices, wheelchair users, parents with strollers, anyone with limited mobility, people with grocery carts. People depend on transit for employment, childcare, grocery shopping, pharmacy needs, medical appointments, educational opportunities, leisure, and socialization. Not everyone can afford a taxi or have access to other transportation options. Waterloo City Council heard of two distressing examples of impacted users. One was a mother with a daughter that requires a wheelchair. Another was a university student that was less abled. In their cases, they were unable to leave their block after the storm, and the student was unable to attend lectures and was considering dropping out. These are glaring examples of equity issues. So what are some solutions? Better coordination between the region and the city for snow clearing at transit stops. Ask transit operators to report snow clearing issues at stops on their routes immediately. A real-time problem reporting system so that transit users can submit issues. As a region, we should strive for equity, inclusion, and accessibility for all. This includes transit, which is not a luxury and is absolutely vital to many residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice, for your presentation, being here tonight. With that, we will take a 10-minute break or recess. And we'll see everybody at around 8:38 to resume. And Graham, I'll call on Graham Bachler, who is here, I know. Graham, come on back up to the podium. Graham, you've got, good evening, you've got 5 minutes, welcome.
That's going to really help. My name is Graham Beckler. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the many different grassroots or community organizations and activists, including those that have delegated here tonight, who have been working tirelessly to create a more equitable and just community for everyone. I'm grateful for the work they've already done and for the work they continue to do. And I'd also like to thank council for listening to what I have to say. So let me begin by just sharing two truths from my perspective. One is that there are too many people suffering in our community. The second is that there's significant healing that needs to take place. I want to ask the council to consider the questions, what do you think is needed for healing to take place? How can we be in community with each other to address the root causes? And it's the root that needs to be addressed. Anything else is reactionary. Only addressing things symptomatically, ensuring that these problems will persist and most certainly worsen. There are people experiencing homelessness. There's ongoing poverty. There's enduring systemic racism towards Black, Indigenous, and racialized bodies. Our 2S LGBTQIA plus community members continue to be subjected to discrimination and violence. It's no secret that power and privilege are unequally distributed to some, while simultaneously being withheld from others. The list of overlapping systems of oppression is unfortunately too long. Echoing the words of Leanne Bedosemasake Simpson, I subscribe to the belief that it's never enough to just critique the system and name oppression. We also have to create the alternative on the ground and in real time. So, how should we go about healing? What can be done to help change the circumstances under which marginalized groups continue to suffer? I'm here seeking some new solutions, some new ways of being. I certainly don't have all the answers. I have a lot to learn myself, but I can say this with conviction. To address the deep and complex needs of our community and begin healing from the harm done by existing systems of oppression, the answer cannot be allocating more money to the police. Budgets are moral documents revealing the priorities and values of those with decision-making power. So when you're finalizing this budget, I ask that you do so by foregrounding that which is ethically justifiable. I'm asking that you redirect the proposed increase to the police budget to address fundamental community needs. I'm asking that you adopt the recommendations of the ACB Network of Waterloo Region as articulated in their document, Defund the Police, Refund the Community. Choosing to do so will be taking a step towards helping those most in need and by extension, the community as a whole. I ask that you choose healing and not further harm. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Graham. I'd like to now call upon Auntie Kenny and Chestnut. Auntie and Chestnut, you have 5 minutes. Good evening.
Sego, Sewagego, Gana Gwendalago, Egada Tadina Doni, Niyanyad. I'd like to, my name is Auntie Kenny, which is a short form of my Ganyangaha Tigrinya handle, which translated into English means baby girl born at dawn in a very special place in North Dakota. This is my partner, Chestnut, Wonder Dog, Sepala. We would like to acknowledge our presence here in the shared territory of Block 2 of the 1784 Haldeman Treaty Territory with the Ungwe of the Osegawane, which in Ganyangaha, or otherwise known as Mohawk, which is one of the languages spoken in this shared treaty territory, means residents of the Grand River watershed. So part of my reason for being here today is to present ourselves formally. This is actually reminding me very much of already just the way you've got yourself seated, but with some new modern technology that we have come to expect from the land of Google, the Perimeter Institute, BlackBerry, several internationally renowned universities and colleges. And we have we have achieved vertical integration from the grassroots all the way up to outer space. So Stephen Hawking was also here in 2010 at the Perimeter Institute doing a residency program. And I would just like to remind everyone that Professor Hawking was British. So part of that voice that we hear on Big Bang Theory came from here. Probably also Silicon Valley too. But I'd like to acknowledge my presence here. And one of the things that I would like to do is share the resources that you have in your package, which includes some essential documents that we are now in the process of integrating into school curriculum. So September 30th is Orange Shirt Day, and anyone who's got children in school knows that that's, every child matters, no matter how old. Everyone matters, and we're in a situation right now globally, especially here in the region, where it's all hands on deck. So I would like to invite you to participate, even more than you already are. I realize this is a strategic planning and budgetary meeting, so I'm here to tell you I'm actually not here to ask for any money. So, but what I do need is a formal endorsement from this council that recognizes us as your counterparts on the Crown Indigenous Relations side of things, so that we're working together, as this region has a long history since time immemorial that goes on in perpetuity for as long as the waters flow, the sun shines, and the grass grows. So even though we've had some changes in the relationship, and this also includes police services, which I understand is, from what I can hear, the major concern in terms of how we do resource distribution. So the good news here is that we have already come up with a solution to the problems we're facing right now. It's just gotten a little lost, like the Orenda, Joseph Boyden, that he mentioned. And it doesn't go anywhere. We are all human, and we are residents here. So one of the things we want to do is look after each other and share the resources that we have. It's in our nature, it's in our DNA. So one of the things that we're asking for by appearing here is formal recognition for Chestnut and I as reconciliation practitioners and residents. No, we're not Stephen Hawking, we're a little more grassroots, but we're looking for essentially the same thing. I would like to formally recognize the new Waterloo Regional Police Chief, Mark Crowell, to the treaty space, and looking forward to helping them implement their 231 calls for justice and 94 calls to action. That we are also looking for some administrative support from this council, because as we've seen, you're very good at that. We get our funding from the federal tier, but we're so busy out doing what we do that we just need some help from your excellent administrative people so that we meet Canada Revenue Agency criteria. We'd like to also invite you to participate in the 45-minute online training that is free, and anyone who wishes to be part of our PhD pilot program together, the Water School for Decision Makers, at your level of decision making. I'm almost there.
Thank you.
And Also, the one thing that I would ask you to do formally, as a matter of public interest, is to release the Tanaka report, which this council paid for, as well as the metadata collected for your annual water report. Now, the metadata, it's a matter of public interest and safety.
Auntie,
and then,
thank you for your presentation. To be respectful of the others that are behind you, we're going to conclude there. So thank you very much for you and Chestnut coming in tonight. Okay?
so now, is there anyone here who would help extend my time by asking me a question that could also, because I do this quite frequently, and I'm going to be reporting back to how well this council is functioning, and if you're playing the clock, and if you're playing for time, or if you're being collaborative,
Auntie,
within reason.
Auntie, everybody has been allocated 5. I've given you more time. We've got folks, many folks behind you that would like to have their time and say tonight to council for this budget. So I'd like to thank you for coming in, and thank you again for your time. Okay.
Now, I have been watching. So are there any questions from any council members that could want to hear some more information?
Your time is done today, Auntie, so thank you very
So
much.
there are no questions?
There are no questions.
So
I'd like
nobody
to
in
now
the
call
council?
upon Laura Coakley, who I believe may be sitting or waiting virtually. We'll call upon Laura to the I believe she's on the Zoom call, so Laura? And no, Laura, I will call now on Courtney Waterfall, Chapter Director, Shelter Movers, Waterloo Region. She is also appearing virtually. Courtney, welcome this evening. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair and members of Council, for allowing me to come and talk about the incredible work Shelter Movers Waterloo Region is doing in our community. My name is Courtney Waterfall, and I am the Chapter Director of the Waterloo Region Chapter of Shelter Movers, a national volunteer-powered charitable organization that provides moving and storage services to individuals and families experiencing abuse, primarily women and their children. In collaboration with local businesses and community agencies, we support families as they transition to a life free from violence. In 2019, there were more than 107,000 cases of gender-based violence reported across the country. Annually, there are over 68,000 admissions to shelters for survivors of abuse, and in 2022, 182 women and girls were killed by a family member or intimate partner. The most dangerous place for women and girls in Canada is their home. Locally, 5 out of 6 homicides in our region last year were the result of family or intimate partner violence, with over 6,190 calls related to intimate partner violence to police. According to a 2019 report from the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, our region has one of the highest rates of sexual assault and intimate partner violence reported to police across the country. Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge was identified as the least safe place for women to live in Canada. It was in part because of this that the Shelter Movers chapter in Waterloo region was established. We now have 7 chapters across the country and have completed over 5,000 moves since 2016. Our Waterloo chapter was established in December of 2020, and as of today, we have completed 249 moves in our region, moving 249 survivors, over 231 children, and nearly 60 pets to safety. While we do move survivors of any gender experiencing any form of abuse, women do make up approximately 99% of our clients. So I will use the terms she, her, and women when I am speaking about the clients that we serve. We help remove barriers to new beginnings. Women tend to return to their abuser 6 or 7 times before they leave for good. And that's if they're fortunate enough to not be the victim of femicide or increased violence, which chances of this increase drastically once a woman has made the decision to leave and in the 6 months following the end of the relationship. Leaving an abuser is fraught with many risks and obstacles. At Shelter Movers, we work to remove as many barriers as possible to ensure our clients are able to start fresh. We remove some emotional barriers by ensuring our clients are able to take their precious items and keepsakes. We reduce financial barriers by removing the costs associated with moving, storing, and replacing belongings. And we also remove safety risks by ensuring police or security are present on moves where there's any risk that an abuser could be present. We arrange for pet fostering for as long as the client needs, and we will also arrange for translation services should there be a language barrier. We will store a client's belongings as long as they need it, and we will move a client as many times as needed, whether they're moving into a shelter, transitional housing, or their new permanent home. Should a client return to their abuser, we will absolutely move them out of the abuser's home again, no judgment. As I mentioned, we have now completed 249 moves in this region. In our first full year, we did 102 moves. This year, we are on track to complete 150 moves with demand increasing. So far this month, we have completed 6 moves, and it is only February 8th. We are moving an average of 13 families per month locally and 130 families per month across the country. This means that in our region, we are moving 10% of our national total. And when we consider our size in comparison to chapters such as the GTA, Montreal, Vancouver, and Ottawa, this is scary.
1 minute.
And we know that we are only scratching the surface. We work closely with organizations such as Women's Crisis Services and the YWCA, but we still have work to do to ensure we're able to support all survivors across the region. I'd like to share a quote from one of our volunteers. I've seen quite a variety of situations on moves, including a multi-million-dollar home, a senior gentleman, and a high-risk situation with 2 officers and weapons on site. It's a reminder that things can happen to anyone. There's no one type who has this experience, but in every case, I see people who want to help. Shelter Movers bridges the gap between a client's situation right now and their future. We help make change happen. We are primarily volunteer run with few key paid roles to ensure stability and expertise for our team, our clients, and our community partners. We currently have approximately 170 volunteers, 1 full-time paid staff member, and 3 part-time staff members. We need to grow our team, and we are asking for $75,000 to increase some of our staff hours, offset additional costs such as fuel and vehicle rentals, and rental fees for training and events. I would like to leave you with a quote from one of our clients. I'm so incredibly grateful. If I could stop crying, I'd be able to express myself better. But right now, all I can say is thank you so much for getting me home safely. I am finally free. Finally free.
Thank you. Thank you, Courtney. We do have a question. Councillor Foxton.
Courtney, thank you for your presentation and thank you for what you do. I wonder if you could, I'd like to hear more about your program. Could you email Regional Council? And it just says Regional Council at waterlooregion.ca. And tell us how you began, where you're located, and how it all works out. How brave of you, and thank you so much for what you do.
Thanks, I will do that.
Thank you, Courtney. We do have, I believe, Laura Coakley that was to present previously. She's now online. Laura, you've got 5 minutes. Good evening.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here today. So my name is Laura. I'm a citizen of Kitchener, and I'm here today to support the overwhelming call that we've been hearing tonight to action to strongly encourage the regional councillors to reject the proposed police budget and to send it back to the Police Services Board for a 0% increase for this year. We really need to invest in our community. I think that's been really made clear tonight through some really amazing speeches and presentations. We know it works. We know that street outreach significantly improves outcomes for quicker exit of homelessness. We know that it also improves quicker access to substance use supports and mental health supports and better relationship building. While all of these workers are scraping together resources, experiencing severe staff turnover due to burnout, earning low wages themselves, and dealing with underfunded programs, they're still doing this work and this very needed and important work. They're all still out there supporting our community. The evidence of investing in real upstream supports provided by community organizations is there. For example, the consumption treatment services in Kitchener, our safe consumption site where people go to use substances in safe environments, has reversed 872 overdoses since October 2019 to the end of December of last year. Not a single death has occurred at this site. So we know that community action works. We also know that our current mental health supports in Waterloo Region aren't coming close to meeting the needs in our community because they're so underfunded and cannot keep up with the growing number of people that need support. By May of last year, crisis calls to our mental health crisis support line increased by 40%. This was without an increase in funding for more staff to take on those higher numbers. So less people are getting services, less people are getting needed mental health support, which means that our community is suffering. As well, we've also recently heard from our local hospitals that they're stating that their services are not appropriate to support individuals going through mental health crises and or dealing with mental health issues. They're now calling for a better way to redirect individuals to mental health professionals. So why can't we expand this further to include police officers and police services? They should not be responding to mental health crises. They should not be responding to individuals sleeping on the streets. We have street outreachers in those roles, and we have mental health care professionals in these roles as well. We just need more of it, and it needs to be funded. But we won't get there to really support our community members if we continue to fund enforcement programs instead of prevention and upstream programs. People are not an upstream measure. They react to situations and don't respond to the root causes of these problems. There are people here tonight that have answers. We've heard a lot of them tonight. There are community organizations that know what the challenges are in Waterloo Region and that know what we need to make our community better. They have the tools, they have the ideas, they just don't have the funding. We need more mental health care supports. We need more street outreach workers. We need more affordable housing. We need quicker access to substance use treatments. We know all this. We've heard all this tonight. Many of us have discussed it in length. We hear it on the news, we know it. But we also know that what we need isn't more enforcement and it isn't more police. We need change and we need it through our community organizations. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. I'll now call on Megan Snyder. Megan will be appearing virtually. Megan, good evening. You've got 5 minutes.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, and I will be brief tonight. I'm here on behalf of Unsheltered Campaign. We are a community advocacy group for issues surrounding unsheltered homelessness, part of Civic Hub Waterloo Region. So the region of Waterloo has noted online that municipalities across the province face significant budget challenges. Despite these challenges, the region is entertaining a request from the Police Services Board for an $18 million operating budget increase. This is on top of a budget that currently sits at almost $200 million and represents 32% of each dollar residents pay in regional property taxes. The region of Waterloo spends almost twice as much on policing as it does on all forms of housing services. The Unsheltered Campaign stands with other community groups, including anti-racist and Indigenous initiatives, that called on the Waterloo Regional Council to reject this police budget. Increased policing does not keep people safe, does not decrease crime rates, and does not invest in the community. Police budgets do not address pressing social problems like unsheltered homelessness. Instead, communities need upstream investments in programs that reduce the need for police responses. We commend those councillors who are thinking differently about the police budget and looking at ways the proposed increase could better be spent in the community. We call on the Waterloo Regional Council to reallocate the police budget to desperately needed areas of social services, services that better support all residents of the region, including those experiencing unsheltered homelessness. And that is a response from the community members of the Unsheltered Campaign. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Megan. Appreciate your time tonight. I'd like to now call upon Jennifer Hutton, of the CEO of the Women's Crisis Services of Waterloo Region. Jennifer's here in person. Good evening, Jennifer. You've got 5 minutes.
Good evening. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm Jennifer Hutton, CEO of Women's Crisis Services of Waterloo Region. We have 90 shelter beds for our community. We are one of the largest violence against women shelters in the province and are the only domestic violence shelter in the region. This is our core business. Our shelter beds are either full or almost full at any given time. Half of our residents are children. Our residents are now staying upwards of 1 year due to the affordable housing crisis. With the increased domestic violence rates, the demand for our services are going up, and with folks staying longer, we're finding a significant bottleneck in our service. To do our small part, in May, we purchased Aspen Place, a triplex for the purpose of transitional housing with the benefit of on-site staff offices. In August, just in time for the start of the school year, we moved 3 families in. In reflecting over the past 5 months, this short-term housing model is working. It's allowing families to move out of congregate living, which can be difficult, onto increased independence in preparation for long-term housing. As of January, Aspen Place has been home to 5 moms and 12 kids. Another area of significant pressure is our regional outreach services. I am sure you've read about the 5 out of 6 homicides in our region over the past year that have been rooted in domestic violence. Practical, timely community support, staff with a specific expertise in domestic violence that can complete risk assessments and provide comprehensive safety planning are needed now more than ever. From fiscal year 2021 to fiscal year 21-22, we had a 78% increase in the demand for outreach services. Working with youth, over 500 with 1 part-time staff, at least 30% of those youth reporting domestic violence in their homes. Engaging men, including working towards developing some offender support, a significant gap in our region, providing rural support and working closely with community partners. We have a full-time outreach worker at the Family Violence Project and at Family and Children's Services. This small but mighty team is doing it all, but it's not sustainable as a team struggling to keep up with the demand while avoiding wait lists and bringing services outside the office into spaces that are most accessible for those that we serve. We're fortunate to receive provincial funding. However, when I started in this role almost 5 years ago, we relied on community support for only about 25 to 30% of our funding. Now that's over 40%. We're having to raise over $1 million and are struggling to keep up because of the significant need and having to grow our services to meet that demand. We have not received regional funding despite supporting over 4,500 folks from our community. So my ask of you today is twofold. Consider one-time support for Aspen Place so that we can replicate that model elsewhere. Cambridge is top of our list, knowing that this works and that there are very few options for second stage or transitional housing, and provide $60,000, which would fund an additional outreach worker for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer, for your time tonight. I'd like to now call upon, Councillor Verbenovic for clarification.
Thank you, Chair Harris. And just before I ask my question, Jennifer, thank you for coming in and for all the great work that you're doing. I was a ward councillor when you built the facility at on Ottawa Street, and as you know, was at the opening of Aspen Place, and it truly is a wonderful facility. I guess my question for you is, over the last couple of years during the pandemic, and sort of coming out of it. My sense is the pressures on you as an organization and the need for your services has gone up significantly. I'm wondering if you can just touch on that.
Yeah, like I mentioned, 78% increase in outreach, seeing shelter beds full, and that bottleneck because they're staying longer. Calls to the crisis line going up about 33%. The people that we're supporting are very complex and complicated, mental health, addictions, all of that. Our staff have been working throughout the pandemic and are frankly getting pretty burnt out, as a lot of people that have worked throughout this are. So the need has grown. The level of violence is significant. 52 femicides in 52 weeks in Ontario. That was not commonplace. I'm hearing about them all the time. Collingwood, Bowmanville, so it's quite concerning.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, through you, Chair Harris, and thank you for the work that you do, the important work you do, as well as for coming in tonight. Just wondered around clarification. You mentioned that you're requesting $60,000 to support the outreach worker, but I was wondering how much you're requesting to replicate the Aspen model.
Well, what we did with Aspen Place, we took a little bit of a leap. And we used a lot of our spending, a lot of our savings. We spent a lot, but we used a lot of our savings, I should say, to do it mortgage-free. We were lucky to be able to do that, but of course that's a bit of a drain on savings. And we needed to do something with people staying so long. It's a bit of a drop in the bucket, but the model works, and that cost us about $1 million, and we're turning over and providing that second stage housing, which is an obvious gap in the region.
So is your ask for approximately $1 million or $1.5 million?
Yeah, we have the model, and we could a capital funding of $1 million, $1.5 million. We're getting a very small amount of operating funding to have a worker on site. However, that is year-to-year funding and hasn't been annualized yet, so it's hard to say if that will continue.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Chair Redmond.
Thanks, Jennifer. I've really watched Aspen House with interest. You've partially answered my question for Councillor McCabe. I was going to call her Councillor Dorothy. 1.5 million is really impressive savings. Was that a community fundraising, or how did you come to get that kind of nest egg to move this project forward?
Well, we've had some investments, and there was some additional funding during the COVID from the federal government that was quite flexible, so we were able to use some of that. There was a portion that we could use a bit for like minor capital costs as well to renovate it, but we kept it pretty, we did it all in all for not a whole lot, more than 1.5-2 million max.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Deutschman.
Thank you, Chair Harris. Thank you, Ms. Hutton, for coming in and for the work that you and your team do in the community. It's very important, absolutely. I was just curious, so have you inquired with other levels of government for funding for another project like Aspen, something that would be collaborative with 3 levels of government, for example?
Yeah, we really wanted to make sure the model worked. We did initially apply for federal government funding, and it was really around building and converting. So we did take market rent and then make it affordable, which is often not necessarily funded. So we didn't receive funding in that regard. Of course, the focus is on net new, but it's market rent, it's unaffordable, and we were able to convert that to very affordable housing.
But for the next one, are you trying to get funding from the federal government or provincial government for your next Aspen 2?
Yeah, Aspen 2, we would have to look at that. Again, are we going to convert something that's market rent and have the money up front to do that? Or are we going to look for converting a building or finding the land, which isn't always easy? So we haven't kind of figured that all out. And we're trying to kind of assess how many Aspens do we need? 5 sounds good to me and seems to be that need to really remove that bottleneck.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'll now call on Mark Vuorinen, Artistic Director of the Grand Philharmonic Choir, who is here in person. Mark, good evening. You've got 5 minutes.
Good evening, Chair Redmond, Chair Harris, and regional councillors. Thank you for providing an opportunity for public commentary in what we know is a difficult time facing you as you set your 2023 budget. My name is Mark Vuorinen, and I'm the Artistic Director of the Grand Philharmonic Choir, which is proud this year to be celebrating its 100th anniversary here in this region. Here's a little bit about us. We produce, perform, and share choral music in and around Waterloo region. Often, that takes the form of concerts with the Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony in Kitchener's world-class concert hall, the Centre in the Square. But just as often, we also provide free performances and outreach events in places like public parks, public libraries, and at City Hall. We provide valuable music education and literacy to our singers and to members of the public through these activities that take place outside the concert hall. We operate 4 choirs for singers of all ages. We are still rebuilding after the pandemic, but in a normal year, we are over 200 singers. And annually, 14,000 people in the region experience our music in a variety of settings each year. As a special 100th anniversary project this year, we have made a documentary video about the significance of choral music and singing, group singing, and its rich history dating back to the 19th century here in this region. It'll be shown at the Ken Sealing Regional Museum as part of a new exhibit, which opens in just a few weeks about the new unique choir experience. For many years, we have received operating support from the region of Waterloo, for which we are very grateful. Last year, there was a proposal to end this annual grant of $32,000. And at that time, you heard from many of our singers and supporters and decided to preserve the grant in 2022. The matter of cultural grants was then sent back to staff for further study. I am here this evening because we understand that a new funding structure for arts organizations is being planned, and we're not sure what that will mean for us. More than 20 years ago, Waterloo Regional Council established 5 core groups for operating funds from the region. 2 of those, the Opera Company and the Arts Council, have since ceased to function. The Waterloo Region Children's Museum became the museum and is still receiving operating funds, and our sibling organization, the Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony, remains and is still receiving this funding as well. We are the 5th named core group. We have received operating funding from the region of Waterloo for many years, decades in fact, and with the changes that are coming to the grant programs, changes that are not yet clear to us, our future with the region is now very uncertain. So I'm here tonight to emphasize the importance of robust core operating funding for the Grand Philharmonic Choir. Operating funds mean financial stability. Operating support is the lifeblood of nonprofit organizations like ours. It is not an exaggeration to say that to withdraw core funding to the Grand Philharmonic is to undermine our future survival. We understand that this community has grown and changed swiftly and profoundly, and there are many demands on regional resources. But we ask you to consider that the arts sector is incredibly valuable to a growing community in ways that may not always be immediately obvious. We provide performances that delight and uplift audience members, and when that happens, there is a shared experience that brings those audience members together. We provide singers with the opportunity to make music together, and when that happens, it creates a sense of belonging. This is especially important for people who are new to the area. We provide a first-rate music education for children and youth singers, and when that happens, it's there for everyone, regardless of income, No one is turned away from any of our choirs because of an inability to pay membership fees. These are wonderful outcomes for our community. We are able to make them happen because we have the support of individuals, foundations, funding agencies, and importantly, municipal governments. I would ask that you please consider this as you decide the amount you offer to arts organizations and the way in which you decide to support them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. We do have some clarification questions. Councillor Verbanovic.
Thanks, and thanks very much, Mark, for coming in tonight and for all that you folks do. I'm wondering if you can elaborate a little more on, you touched on the absence of this funding would be very critical to an organization like yourselves. And I'm wondering if you can just elaborate a little bit more on that and just really help us understand how this plays out, not just for you and other groups locally, but typically for groups like yourselves in cities, quite frankly, across Canada.
Sure, thanks for the question. Operating, as I mentioned in what I said, operating funds allow us to have stability, to look into the future, to plan for years ahead. We are a very large organization by most standards of other choirs across the country, by our budget, by our size, and by the number of events that we put on each year. COVID notwithstanding, it was a bit of a dry spell for choirs everywhere, of course. But we rely on this funding in order to be able to continue the relationships with many other organizations that we work with. One very important one you'll hear from in just a few moments, the Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony. We hire the orchestra 3 times a year, providing work for those musicians as they play on our concerts. They reciprocate and hire us to play on their concerts or sing on their concerts. Without that sort of core funding and ability to know and plan for the future, those kinds of relationships become very tenuous and difficult to sustain. Performing in the center of the square would be another example of a relationship that we have with a body here in the region that is important to how we perform and what we perform. Without that stability, it would be very difficult for us to maintain a presence in that municipal hall.
So if I hear you correctly, beyond all of the impacts that a group like yours has in the community, if the lack of funding would in fact not just create challenges for you, but in all likelihood for other greater challenges for other cultural groups in the community as
there
well.
There would absolutely be a spin-off effect to that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank
Councillor Foxton.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I forgot, did you say $32,000 was the amount?
That's correct.
That's all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Erb.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. So I was going to ask if it was $32,000, and then what's the total budget, your budget?
It varies year by year, but it's about $400,000 to $450,000.
Okay, so this wouldn't be quite 10% of your budget.
That's correct.
Do any of the other municipalities in the region contribute financially?
We are very grateful to receive funds from the City of Waterloo and the City of Kitchener as well.
And what would those amounts be, just for curiosity, you know?
Off the top of my head, 10,000 from Waterloo and about 13 from Kitchener.
Okay, thank you.
Roughly. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much,
Mark, for coming in. I believe we've got Bisan Zubi appearing virtually. Bisan, if you're with us, welcome this evening. You've got 5 minutes. Bisan.
Thank you. Regional Council, fellow delegates, community members, my name is Bisan Zubi, and I speak to you as a renter in downtown Kitchener. I think some really important and amazing points were made by the service providers that have spoken to you tonight, so I'm going to focus my delegation on my lived experiences in downtown Kitchener and how those have led me to reject the idea that the Waterloo Region Police Service needs more police officers. I moved from Waterloo to Kitchener after I was renovated from my home of 5 years. As an aside, the rent of my former apartment doubled from $1,100 to $2,200, which, if that kind of exploitation of renters decimation of affordable units was illegal, maybe I would see the need for more police because that actually happens a lot here. But what I saw instead was how stark the differences in policing approaches are from uptown Waterloo until downtown Kitchener. Maybe if I still lived in uptown, I might have even believed that there weren't enough members in the WRPS because I never really saw any in my day-to-day life. But in downtown Kitchener, I see cops far more. One day I counted 10 patrol cars in less than 15 minutes. It's like a different country. The WRPS has failed to make the case that they need more police. In fact, everything I've seen supports them having more than enough cops than necessary. This can be seen in positive ways. For example, their response to crises when they're actually needed, like the robbery that just happened at Conestoga Mall. As a previous delegate mentioned, they had enough cops to properly handle the situation and make that resident feel safe. Great news, right? They also had more than enough cops to deal with an inebriated man that I saw in distress close to my house last summer. I saw 3 cop cars pull up on that curb, and they watched as paramedics put him, he could barely stand, into the back of an ambulance. There are also more than enough cops to send them as backup to intimidate the unhoused community when the region bulldozed the former encampment on Charles and Sterling last winter. There are also more than enough cops to send one undercover to take photos of protesters at the Black Lives Matter march in June 2020. So maybe the problem isn't enough cops, it's what the cops are spending their time doing. For example, if I saw a robbery in progress, I would call 911. Well, why would I call the cops on the person having a mental breakdown outside my house? This happened 2 weeks ago, by the way. This person was not dressed for the weather, and they were smashing things and screaming unintelligibly at 3 a.m. What could the cops do? Take them away? Where? What would change in that person's life? How would that person be helped? More importantly, how would they be harmed? I don't know the answer to any of those questions, but I do know that the next time I saw them, they were doing better and they had a blanket around their shoulders. I don't know who gave it to them, but I'm grateful that they did. And why would I call the cops the time a man left his group of friends and followed me down the street, yelling at me to talk to him while I was walking my dog alone one night? I was upset by this, but not for the reasons that you might think. This young Black man was new to Canada and didn't understand the danger he was putting himself in by following somebody in that way. I could have been the kind of person who calls the police as a first resort. But who was the actually vulnerable person in that situation? On a systems level, it's not me. How would calling the cops have helped either of us? I had no reason to be scared of this young man, and I wasn't. I tried to be as clear with him as I could. I said, no. You don't follow women on the street, even if you think you're being friendly. And then I walked him to his friends and I said that they needed to give this man better guidance if they want him to stay safe. They apologized, and me and my dog continued home on our walk. The issue isn't the number of police officers that we have in the region. It's what their focus is. The police board is asking us to divert further our limited community funds to them instead of recognizing that the resources they already have are more than sufficient if they stop doing the work that should be done by the amazing service providers that we have. Every dollar diverted from upstream services feeds into more people in crisis and entrenches a wasteful cycle. As we've heard from so many delegates, we already have community care and upstream services ready and willing to do more. We just need to invest in them. The issues facing downtown Kitchener won't be solved by police, can't be solved by police. We don't need more cops. We need social workers, addiction counselors, accessible public spaces, community programming, settlement workers, and above all, permanent, affordable housing. Please listen to the community and join us in the demand that the Waterloo Region Police Service, as well as the budget and their committee, do their jobs more efficiently, and also support the other organizations that we heard from tonight who are also begging to be able to do their jobs properly as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, B-Sen. Andrew Bennett, Executive Director of the Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony, is appearing in person. Andrew, good evening. You have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Council. It's very nice to be here this evening. Recently, this council heard from Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony regarding the short-term challenges that the organisation faces. We're very grateful to councillors for considering our request yesterday morning, and we look forward to a positive outcome regarding that one aspect of our partnership. But today, I'm here to speak about the ongoing annual grant to the Symphony. Although that amount has declined somewhat in real terms in recent years, it is still a crucial part of the patchwork of funding from all tiers of government that makes the Symphony sustainable and indeed accessible to all parts of our community. Now, it's getting late, and I'm therefore not going to regale you with statistics about economic development or tourist attraction, although I've got plenty if you would like them. Instead, I want to emphasise more personal stories that are spread across our work. Recently, I witnessed a performance by one of the young participants in the Bridge to Music programme for those from families who face economic challenges. And she also faces some learning challenges, but through playing the clarinet, has found a new mode of expression and achievement. The smile on her face as she participated in a recital 2 weeks ago was alone worth all the efforts of her teachers and those who support the programme. A little while ago, an elderly lady was passing through the outside lobby of Centre in the Square during the time just before one of our family concerts. She said, "I haven't heard any live music in nearly 3 years. Could I just pop in and listen?" And of course, the answer was yes. There was some music going on in the lobby. She was in tears. It meant so much to her, just that contact with live music. It was very, very memorable. Just this morning, we started our rehearsals for the opera La Traviata, which is this weekend at Centre in the Square. And young singers from the opera programme at Wilfrid Laurier University were working for the first time in partnership with top calibre international opera singers. Wait for it, including one who'd got on a 6 a.m. flight this morning from New Jersey in order to take over from an ailing colleague. Those young singers, apart from the pleasure of participating in the project, saw so many facets of what a career in this demanding field might look like for them. One of the surprise was one of the Symphony's apparently more conservative supporters, a regular attender. She said, "Why am I here tonight at this concert? I love video game music. I'm here to be with all the fans of video game music who attended that concert of top video game music last fall. I learned never to underestimate the range of musical taste in the whole of our community. It's a pleasure to always be surprised." And finally, perhaps more illustriously in terms of reputation, I should mention the actor Yannick Bisson. I think one or two of you will be familiar with his work in Murdoch Mysteries. We presented a concert of live music from Murdoch Mysteries, and notwithstanding his professionalism, and he's a great actor, I watched as he was in public, overcome with emotion, hearing the music from the television series played live in concert on the stage next to him. Now, every one of those expressions of joy, solace, sheer entertainment perhaps, are multiplied on every occasion that the Symphony performs or welcomes participants to its work. Sometimes our capacity to change lives is planned, sometimes it's serendipitous. We bring our community together and help tell its story. We are a flagship for arts and culture in this growing, diversifying region. We make a difference to the quality of life of tens of thousands of people in this region, in Cambridge, Kitchener, Waterloo, and all the townships. We're immensely proud of our unique role, and we ask that you continue your irreplaceable help in making the Symphony flourish. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, for your presentation. Councillor McCabe for clarification.
Thank you, through you, Chair, and thank you for coming in tonight and for, I think there's no question what the arts community brings from economic development and art and our cultural experience to people who've lived here a long time and to people who move to our community, so thank you for that. I just wondered for clarification if you mentioned that how much you actually receive in an ongoing basis, but you said that it had slightly decreased over, I'm not sure what period of years. So I was just wondering if you could provide some numbers around that. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I think if you look back 10 years, and the numbers are, in fact, if you would like to refer to them, in the staff paper that was circulated yesterday morning. So the figures, you actually do have access to those figures, and you'll see that the cash amount has not kept pace with inflation over the last 10 years. I think from memory, we're 16% down. It is of that order.
And do you have like a whole, like what's the top line number? Is it?
So
like
the current,
down
through you,
from
Chair,
what?
the current grant is $385,000, very approximately, and it was 16% higher in real terms 10 years ago.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
We'll now hear from David Marskell, CEO of the museum. He's appearing virtually. David, good evening. You have 5 minutes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Marskell actually emailed Chair Redmond and myself and Mayor McCabe to inform us that there was a mix-up on dates and he wasn't able to join us this evening.
Okay. All right, thank you. Stephen Caswell, staff lawyer of the Waterloo Region Community Legal Services, I believe is also appearing virtually. Stephen, good evening. You have 5 minutes.
Good evening, thank you. So I'm here on behalf of Waterloo Region Community Legal Services. So we're a community legal aid clinic providing services to low-income residents of Waterloo Region, focusing on the areas of housing, immigration, employment, social assistance, and consumer debt issues. We're here tonight to speak about the growing housing crisis in Waterloo Region. And this crisis disproportionately affects residents living on low incomes, and residents who receive either Ontario Works or Ontario Disability Support Program benefits. So some of the clients that we see or many of the clients we see that experience evictions often don't have any options when they try to find new housing or new place to live. So on that, the recent Canada Mortgage and Housing Rental Market Report from January 2023 contains data showing the extent of the housing crisis. Just a few excerpts from that. The report shows overall vacancy rates in the region are at a 20-year low, being 1.2%. Also, our region, like other regions in Ontario, are experiencing a historic high rate of rent growth. According to the report, the monthly rent amounts are growing at 7.2% per year in the region as of January of this year. The average rent for one bedroom as of this month being $1,850. The report also details the housing crunch for those on low income specifically, with only 5% of the rental housing region being affordable for the lowest quintile of renters, and the vacancy rate for this segment in the rental market being 0%. So we would submit that the region needs to take immediate action to address the urgent housing crisis, and that if it isn't addressed, there'll be an increased rates of homelessness in the region, contributing to tent encampments and the like, which will become more numerous and more populated. We also submit housing is one of the most important social determinants of health, because without housing, as some of the other speakers alluded to, people can't find work, people have difficulty accessing medical care and treatment, mental health treatment, addictions treatment, more likely to end up hospitalized, more likely to have involvement with the criminal justice system. We also submit the region cannot wait for provincial government or federal government funding to address the issue, that budget funds should be allocated now to address the lack of affordable housing. But at the same time, the region should be advocating for emergency funds from the province and the federal government to assist in addressing the housing crisis. Again, we know from research that spending money on housing saves money in other areas such as EMS, police, shelter, outreach, healthcare, mental health services. So an immediate step that could be taken is to increase the 1.55 million that the region spends on the rent assistance program by tripling or even quadrupling it, which could create hundreds of housing options for people that are currently priced out of the market. And that increase would still be less than the increase that is being requested by WRPS. So in closing, we ask that the region make housing a priority concern when determining how to allocate funding in the upcoming budget. We believe the investment will pay dividend in improving the lives of our community members and would also save money in other lines. And finally, we need immediate solutions to address the housing crisis and increase in investment for long-term solutions. Those are our remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate your time tonight. Okay, I would like to call upon Peter Kotwitz, who I believe is in person tonight. Peter, thanks for joining us. You have 5 minutes.
Shoot. Hello, Council. My name is Peter. I'm fortunate to have lived in the Waterloo region since 2006. Thank you for spending your evening listening to the concerns from citizens related to the budget. From the presentation tonight, it is obvious that there are a lot of worthy projects that the region could be funding. I am delegating today to ask for more clarity in the budget. There are several line items which are either confusing or vague. Clarity in the budget is important because the budget document is a way for the region to demonstrate to residents that they are getting good value for money out of property taxes. Here are some examples of vague or unclear budget items. In the 2024, the region is planning on spending $250,000 to study a rail link in the to the Waterloo region airport. This is confusing given that it still takes over an hour to take public transit from downtown Kitchener to downtown Galt. In 2023, the region is planning on spending $1.2 million on advanced transit technology. I couldn't find an explanation for this line item on either the Waterloo region website or the Grand River Transit website. I have learned not to assume that things which sound good are as good as they sound. One such example is right-to-work legislation. When I see a budget item with a vague name, I assume it's a slush fund. There is a similar confusing $3 million line item for police equipment, and that's the line item. It just says police equipment in the 2022 budget book for the Waterloo Region Police. I suspect the line item is very similar in the 2023 budget. The budget for each department has a nebulous professional fees and services line item. For instance, for the Waterloo Regional Police, this line item is $10 million, or about 0.5% of the Waterloo region budget. I would appreciate a bit more granularity. Is the line item for repairs to police cruisers? Is it for security at special events such as Canada Day festivities? The region is planning on spending $450,000 on a study. This is a study, not construction of a pedestrian bridge over the Speed River in Preston. I assume that this will cover the cost of a team of 4 to 5 people working full-time on just this study for a year. I understand that construction is expensive. I don't understand why studies for generic infrastructure are so expensive. I hope that the 2024 budget will be easier to read, and thank you for your time. I really appreciate the opportunity to address council.
Well, thank you, Peter. I would like to call upon Nathan Whalen of Kitchener. He is appearing virtually. Nathan, you've got 3 minutes to speak tonight. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you very much for hearing me this evening.
The reason why I'm here before you is because I'm very concerned that a significant property tax increase is going to really contribute to the already skyrocketing housing costs. And as you know, hundreds of thousands of folks in southwestern Ontario are already struggling to make ends meet. I concur with the delegator before me that did say that there are lots of opportunities to improve the ability for the members of the public to actually analyze the budget. However, I did use some of my financial experience to take a look at the operating budget in particular and provide some potential practical ways that we could reduce the $50.5 million to hopefully get more in line with a 3 to 5% property tax increase on the year. The first thing I draw your attention to is the $15 million approximately in contracts and supplies increases year over year in both transport and transport services. And the reality is that if you look at the population of the Waterloo region, we're really subsidizing Grand River Transit already at about $19.50 per person that lives here, per resident, in a subsidy, right? And we know that a lot of people do not use this. I live in Cambridge, in fact, and the reality is that a lot of the services don't really work for me and my family. So I think that there's definitely an opportunity to take a look at that. $10 million from a combination of the delay in capital spending, including extending the end of life. A lot of capital equipment, when you look at the budget, can we actually, is it really at end of life? Do we need to replace that this year? Could we actually delay replacing some of those capital or equipment components? Or even reducing some of the reserve fund contributions for some departments. For example, ITS contributes about a 1-for-1 ratio. So what they invest in equipment on the year, we also invest back into the reserve. $3.3 million an increase in the airport operating costs. Is there an opportunity to fund this out of airport fees? Has the passenger traffic really increased that dramatically to warrant that increase in funding, which is really, $9,000 additional per day in their operating budget? $2 million, so you can really look at the increases in the CAO budget, the HR budget, corporate services. These are administrative components that if we really need to think about, we're doing an amazing job investing in housing. It sounds like we need more funding in police services, for example. If we're increasing in those areas, and there's lots of valuable projects that were provided before you tonight and obviously beforehand, if we need to increase spending, how do we find some of those offsets in areas that might not have such a end user and citizen impact? So, $1 million across development planning and legislative services, and even COVID spending, for example, bringing that in line with the Ontario grant reduction for about $3 million less. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm going to get myself. Yep. Not seeing any questions. I'd like to call upon Jeffrey Beckner of Kitchener, who is appearing online. Jeffrey, if you're with us, you've got 3 minutes. Good evening.
Oh, he's here. Oh, sorry, he's here.
Okay, Jeffrey's with us tonight, so we'll give him a minute to get to the podium.
As stated, my name is Jeffrey Beckner, and if you've seen my abridged history in community work, I've got a fairly extensive background in community work. And I'm here tonight to speak to the issue of the Regional Council only having a yes or no say about the regional police budget, because this leads to the concept of exclusion rather than inclusion. And it also leads to transparency, the issue of transparency. To be able to only say yes or no fosters exclusion when inclusion is the better way for positive outcomes. Inclusion is not just a buzzword, and it does not mean that the advantage, that a token number of the less advantaged to look in from the outside in, from the sidelines. Inclusion means including all stakeholders impacted by the decisions that are made by the advantaged in positions of power. This means that all of regional council should have the should be involved in the police budgeting process. Inclusion also means that the citizens of everyone should also be informed and consulted regarding police operations and budgeting in a reasonable and appropriate manner that respects police integrity and the rights of the citizens. And council is to be congratulated for doing exactly that tonight. Even a more important aspect of inclusion when it comes to policing is the inclusion of other community members in organizations who have the experience, expertise, and knowledge to deal with our non-criminal actions or activities, or when dealing with persons with special needs. In this regards, I congratulate the regional police in partnering with CMHA to create the integrated mobile police and crisis team. It sounds like an incredibly positive and progressive undertaking. I had to do an awful lot of effort to find out about that information, and I would say that one shouldn't have to. Everyone should be able to be aware of that program and others. As you can see from my abridged resume, wait a minute, sorry. I did a lot of research into the roots of and the contribution to interpersonal violence, and I discovered the abuse violence continuum and the discrimination spectrum. And from this work, I came to understand the darker sides of society, and the police must deal with that every day and every shift. However, there are other social ills that are into the dark side that require more creative use of our individual and collective resources.
Jeffrey, I'd like to thank you for your time.
Yeah, I'm just going to say that I'm not the only one. There's more out there, and so let's be inclusive and not exclusive.
Thank you, Jeffrey, for coming in tonight. I would like to call for any further delegations. Oh, two. Okay, if you want to come down, state your name. You'll have 3 minutes. Sir.
Thank you. My name is Mitchell Avis, Mitchelllavis. Thank you for hosting this tonight. I just want to speak maybe just a little bit through a slightly different lens, maybe offer a slightly different perspective in looking at the budget tonight. So with your region of Waterloo, you do have a strategic plan that guides your direction over the planning horizon. It has a vision, mission, and values. Now, I know I don't have to repeat it back to you, but it is sort of short and optimistic and kind of nice. So an inclusive, thriving, and sustainable region of connected rural and urban communities with global reach, fostering opportunities for current and future generations. Now, Brent Toderin is a former chief planner in Vancouver, and he's known to say that remember the truth about a city's aspirations isn't found in its vision, it's found in its budget. So in other words, are the words that we speak as a region and our actions aligned? The region states it has 6 focus areas: thriving economy, healthy, safe, inclusive communities, responsive and engaging public service, sustainable transportation, environment and climate action, as well as our people. Given those focus areas, I would expect that when I open up the budget, that the proposal in it, that there would be significant investment in certain areas. Things like getting housing built, especially affordable housing, social services for things like addressing homelessness and shelters, giving people the option to get out of cars and expanding our public transportation and building out cycling infrastructure, maybe even an e-bike incentive. The environment, things like climate change, resilience and mitigation, public health, arts, culture, libraries. I can't help but notice, though, that when I do open the budget, the pieces in the pie in the budget don't seem to align with your focus areas. Instead, I see that policing will take up the largest chunk of the pie. This is followed by road spending. If these two are our actual top 2 priorities, are they helping us to achieve our vision? What about the 6 focus areas? I would say no, and something just doesn't quite line up.
1 minute.
I want to live in a region that you describe in your vision and focus areas, one where everybody, no matter their race, gender, sexual orientation, can have a place to live, feel welcome, can easily get around without needing to own a vehicle to essential services, be able to spend time in nature, earn a living wage, and know that we're living sustainably so future generations can also benefit from the same life. But right now, the proposed budget doesn't reflect that. It doesn't reflect your vision, your focus areas, and I don't feel that your hands and mouth are aligned. You are in a position of power. The freight train of the status quo can be stopped, but we need your strong leadership to guide this region in the direction the community has asked for. I support the ACB network's calls to action for the region to reject the police increase and invest that equivalent in upstream services. Their letter has recommendations on how that money can be allocated. And so in conclusion, I ask, which region are we? I'll be watching your actions, not your words.
Thank you. I believe we have another, John, if you want to come up to the microphone and, oh, sorry. Oh. Okay, yep, come on up, state your name. Good evening, you've got 3 minutes.
Good evening, my name is Ashwin Vairavan Annamalai, and I would like to remind this council about the roundabout at Iron Needles and Herb. I'm a pedestrian, I walk to most places, and that's the place that I feel the most dangerous, because a few months ago, a pedestrian got hit and it was up in the news, and a lot of councillors were really supportive of bringing about changes. But even a couple of days before I was there, nothing had changed. So I'd like to request this council to consider including some funds in the budget to fix the roundabout at Iron Needles and Herb. I know it's already close to 10 p.m., so I don't want to take much of your time. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think I saw any other individuals that would like to present, so thank you, everyone. All correspondence received by the Regional Clerk's Office regarding the strategic plan and budget have been compiled and included on this addendum agenda for Council's consideration. Any additional correspondence received after the addendum agenda was sent up until 6:30 p.m. yesterday evening was sent to Council via email and will be included in the minutes of this meeting. Any correspondence received after this meeting will be sent to Council and included in the February 22nd Strategic Planning and Budget meeting agenda. I also want to thank all the residents that have emailed Council directly with their perspective on today's agenda. As always, there are several ways to share your views with Council, including delegating, emailing, or visiting the Engaged Waterloo Region website. With that, I would now like to open the floor and call upon any members of the public who wish to speak at today's public input meeting to the podium. I believe we've already done that, or have called for further ask of that. And so with that, I will now accept the written submissions that were received. Is there any other business? I would like to now start a vote to adjourn the public input meeting. Is there a mover and a seconder? A move by Councillor Nowak, seconded by Councillor Foxton. Please use your yes or no buttons on eScribe. And that is carried. We're going to need about 5 minutes to roll over to the budget meeting. So there will be a new link in eScribe for you all to use for that meeting, and we'll resume in about 5 minutes. Thank you. New link.